Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to Wrestle With.
Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know, that's not a rib.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With.
There's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there.
Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I am absolutely excellent, on top of just feeling great, everything going wonderful. I'm going to go see my good friend Dan Soder this weekend in Austin, Texas.
Well, shout out to Dan. If you have an opportunity and you haven't seen Dan do stand-up, you owe it to yourself to check him out. He's on Netflix, too, but when he's coming to your town, you should check him out. He's going to be in Austin this weekend, right?
At the Cap City Comedy Club in Austin, Texas. I'm going to be there Friday and Saturday night because he's just that damn funny.
And he has the world's best Macho Man impression.
And Andre, you can close your eyes and roar. I have to take a shit. Roar, right you.
Well, a lot of our listeners probably took a shit last week after Survivor Series 1987. It was our first watch-along pay-per-view, and it was your new Thanksgiving tradition. So I imagine a few of you had maybe overdone it and then checked out the new watch-along pay-per-view gimmick that we're doing every single Thanksgiving. I had fun with that, man. What was your feedback?
Well, I think that most of the feedback was that believe it or not, it shocked me a little bit, was that people enjoyed it, was the majority of the feedback that I got. And I thank you for that. That was very nice of you. It was tough for me. I'm not a play-by-play guy.
Well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. We should mention that as soon as we, here's a little peek behind the curtain, I guess. As soon as we stopped recording last week, Bruce said, I ain't feeling it. And I said, well, fuck it, man. I thought it was pretty good. I was watching it at the same time as you, but Bruce, did feel a little out of his element, but I thought it was a fun little Thanksgiving Day deal. Lots of people have downtime that weekend, and it's an opportunity for them to have a chance to watch something and listen to us. Of course, most people probably listen to this in their car, but Thanksgiving weekend, man, people have free time.
Yeah, they do. And they joined it along with us. And I was flabbergasted at that, but it was a lot of fun doing it. It was a lot of fun going back and watching that, and especially the marathon tag team survivor match that would not end. But it was a lot of fun. I tell you the other crazy thing, Conrad, I haven't even shared this with you yet. I'm going through things for the Morning Deuce with Bruce on Facebook.com/something to wrestle that I do every morning at 6:00 in the morning. Now, I'm going through a bunch of date books, and you and I have talked about this several times on air and off air. And I found the, what am I trying to say? The, not the rehearsal, but when Paul Heyman came in for an audition. I found the date, I found the notes, everything on Paul Heyman coming in 1989 for his audition.
How different wrestling may have been had he joined the World Wrestling Federation at that point, right?
I don't see it, pal. God damn. If I may have another volley, sir. If I could just one more time, one more take. I hate his hair. That's about the extent of it.
It's been a while since we've talked about him. I guess we should touch on it here. Dave Meltzer had some comments about our Survivor Series 87 show. We haven't shared this off air. I'd like to read you a post from the Wrestling Observer message board where someone took you to task for the way you defended Vince McMahon. He thought the podcast was pointless because it's all just your bullshit carny spin. And Dave Meltzer chimed in like this: as it pertains to history, Bruce's explanation is inaccurate. Crockett announced Starrcade and every cable company was on board with that as their debut. Vince then announced Survivor Series. The cable companies asked Crockett to move to an unfavorable afternoon time slot on Thanksgiving, which was a big risk, and he did. The plans were to market the two shows together as a $25 package where you get both shows. The companies were thrilled, thinking promoting both would lead to big revenue because fans of each show would buy the other as well due to the discount. Based on Bruce's telling of the story, that would have been impossible since they, quote, asked Vince to put on a show instead of Crockett's show. That's when Vince hit the cable companies with the ultimatum. I thought we covered that last week. And you tried to shoot holes in it, but that's always been the way Dave laid it out, has always been the way I believed it. And you said, no, the cable companies came to him. Do you care to counterpoint Mr. Meltzer?
No, I'm not, because obviously Dave Meltzer was there and was working for the company and was day in, day out right there working with the cable companies and taking all those phone calls and in with Vince on all of those planning things. So obviously Dave Meltzer knows so much more.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm being serious.
So am I.
They did market it as a $25 package briefly. I mean, that's out there. So how would they have done that if Vince was planning to make the strong arm play?
I don't know that they did. And I don't know that I've ever seen that. And I don't know that I ever heard that. So I didn't hear that. Now, cable companies may have tried to do that on their own, but that doesn't mean that Vince was on board with it.
I see what you're saying.
People go into business for themselves all the time.
So whatever that wasn't authorized. So therefore to you doesn't fucking count because they were trying to do it with his product without his permission.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything you'd like to say further on the subject or to Mr. Meltzer or to those who say that you're a carny spin artist?
Trust me.
I could care less what people have to say about me as far as those things go. They weren't there. They don't know. They've never experienced it. I love people who have never, ever been in the business and promoted and been in business where it's their money and their reputation and everything else. And then they try to say, oh, well, they're doing this to hurt another business or they're doing this for this reason when they just don't know. It is all speculation. It's all rumor and innuendo. And that's all it is. And Meltzer, without being there, doesn't know. All he knows is what he surmises and what he thinks he knows. So again, I'm giving you what I was a part of. I'm giving you the meetings I was involved in and the explanations that I got and what I was involved in. I wasn't involved in everything, prior to that. And neither was Dave Meltzer. I gave you what I was involved in.
Let me
That's
ask you
all
this.
I can do.
Whenever pressed on this, because we have been taken to task lately with people saying that something you said was factually inaccurate here or there. And I've always sort of chuckled at that. Like, you've never presented yourself as a fucking journalist. Like, you're not here just the facts, ma'am. Yeah, that's not your role. We're here to make you laugh and we're here to entertain you. But we're also here, and I guess we've never really discussed this on air, but in my opinion, this show is as close as we're ever going to get to the way Vince McMahon thinks. Because for better or worse, you were inside that inner circle long enough that you even have to admit yourself that you do sort of toe the company line, sometimes unknowingly, because that's the way Vince thought. And so when I say toe the company line, I don't mean that you're being a company man or that you're begging for a job or that what everybody listening is going to take that to mean. I mean, you share a lot of common feelings about these different topics with Vince McMahon. Was that fair to say?
Conrad, I was there for 22 years. I was a part of those decisions. I was a part of that company for so long. So when, people come down and say, oh, well, that sucked. Well, a lot of that was my doing. So you're saying that I sucked. Yes, I'm going to defend my work. And yes, I do toe the company line because I worked for that company for that long and I believed in what we were doing. If I didn't, I wouldn't do it. The other thing to point out on this is I'm not giving you what I think on different things and trying to give you a spin. I'm not giving you what somebody called me on the phone at 2:00 in the morning that was bitter and upset and told me their version of something. I'm giving you what I experienced it and what I had to deal with.
Well,
I'm giving you my perspective, not anybody else's.
And if we are getting another perspective, it's Vince McMahon's.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the insight into Vince's mind through my perspective. Yes.
There you go. Well, so anyway, we hope you're digging what we're doing. Tell your friends, if you support the show and really appreciate what we're doing, man, spread the word. We would love to have you tag a friend on Facebook or Twitter and recommend the show. And also too, I want to tell you that we're giving you what you want, man. Next week, we're covering the Steiner brothers in the WWF and of course, Big Papa Pump singles run in the WWE. So much to cover with this topic. Even though they had a brief run, I want to examine Why did they have a brief run? What were the plans? What was supposed to happen? What could have happened? What didn't happen? Why didn't it happen? And then, of course, everything that happened right and wrong about Scott Steiner's singles run. And of course, question or topic or anything like that you would like to contribute to that show, you can participate right now over at facebook.com/something to wrestle. Just look for the Steiner Brothers post, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask your question below. Now, the Rockers lost that poll by just 10 votes. So we hear you. Rockers fans, mark your calendars down. Friday, January 12th is the 25th anniversary of when the Rockers broke up on the barbershop. And on that day, we're going to cover the Rockers and Marty Jannetty's singles run. So that's going to happen on Friday, January 12th in honor of the 25th anniversary of maybe the most famous tag team breakup of all time. Right, Bruce?
It definitely goes down as history as one of the most memorable because of the way that it took place on the barbershop. Marty Jannetty going through the glass, and one member of that tag team skyrocketing onto one of the most incredible singles run in the history of the business.
You can also vote in our next poll, and this is going to be for the show airing Friday, December 15th. And you can vote right now. That poll is up at facebook.com/something to wrestle. Bruce, are you ready for me to run through these 4 topics with you?
Yes, please do.
Poll topic number 1, Edge. What might we cover if we talk about Edge in the WWE?
Well, we're going to go back as to who it was that actually first brought Edge to the attention of us in the WWF, how Edge came in, going through the Funkin' Dojo in the Stanford production studio, and the whole thing all the way through the Brood to his incredible run, Hall of Fame career in the WWF.
As a reminder, we're going to cut that off at November 2008. Poll topic, topic number 2, Randy Orton. And again, we're covering it through November 08. What might we cover if Randy Orton wins the poll?
Well, we're going to talk about the phone call that I received from his father on one day in the office and what his dad told me about Randy getting into the wrestling business and Randy's journey through Ohio Valley Wrestling and coming on into the ranks of the WWE and all the ups and downs of Randy Orton.
Next up, poll topic number 3, and again, through November 08, Rob Van Dam. What might we talk about if Rob Van Dam wins the poll?
Well, we're going to go all the way back to, again, Dory Funk Jr. had quite an effect on at least 2 of these guys. But Dory Funk Jr. and Rob Van Dam, the connection there. Dory suggesting RVD way back when, but also me meeting up with Rob Van Dam at an independent show in Los Angeles, California one night. And we were in a private suite in a balcony, the conversation that took place there and how quickly that got back to Paul Heyman. Totally impromptu, but all the ups and downs of dealing with Mr. Monday Night, Rob Van Dam.
Last but certainly not least, your great friend, and I guess maybe one of the greatest crossover superstars from the WCW organization to the WWF, Booker T is poll topic number 4. What might we cover if Booker T wins the poll?
In my opinion, I believe that Booker T is the single biggest success that came over from WCW to transition into the WWE. He is personally one of my best friends in the wrestling business. And the crazy thing about it is we live about a mile from each other. And I did not even really know Booker until he came to work for us in 2001, I guess, or 2000.
So there you go. Go vote in the poll right now. You fans have wanted some new school stuff, or so you say on Facebook. Well, here you go. Edge, Randy Orton, Rob Van Dam, and Booker T. The poll is live right now. Facebook.com/something to wrestle. And don't forget that's going to air on Friday, December 15th. Next week, we've got the Steiner Brothers. You can ask your questions also on Facebook. And also don't forget that Sunday, December 17th, we're coming to the House of Blues, Boston, right before Clash of Champions. Come see us at 2:00. You'll hear stories you can't hear on the podcast. And man, wrestling used to be about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And Bruce has stories for days on all of that. And some of those stories just aren't podcast friendly. So come check us out. boxofgimmicks.com. You won't regret it. Lots of fun stuff from the golden era of the WWF, the Attitude Era, and of course, Boston specific stories we've never told before. You're going to have a blast, but don't take my word for it.
Really enjoyed it a lot.
Great stories, great impressions.
It was amazing. It was so funny.
Do not miss out on the fun when Something to Wrestle With Live with Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson comes to Boston, Massachusetts.
Bruce was great.
You hear stuff at this live show that you do not hear on the podcast.
Hearing the stories, even the uncensored ones, those are what you really want to come to see.
Sunday, December 17th at 2 p.m. at the House of Blues in Boston, Mass.
Now that I've been here today, I know what he's not telling us. And it was really good.
It's like coming to see a podcast live, and better. Yeah, getting up close with Bruce and Conrad.
Something to Wrestle With Live with Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson.
Great stories, great impressions.
Good times. Meet Conrad and Bruce. Stories you can't hear in the podcast. Impressions.
I think you're awesome.
You know.
Extra cheese, extra pepper, extra onions, motherfucker.
Not too bad, fellas, but let's leave the impressions to Bruce for now. Something to Wrestle With Live with Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson, Sunday, December 17th at 2 p.m. at the House of Blues in Boston. Do not miss out on this one.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, it's time for What Happened When Jake the Snake Roberts came to the World Wrestling Federation. And Bruce, this is one of our most requested topics. Jake the Snake Roberts, certainly one of the all-time greats. Wouldn't you agree?
I think that Jake the Snake is definitely one of the all-time great performers, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Probably one of the most underrated psychologists in the wrestling business as far as working in the ring and telling a story.
I'll drink to that. So of course, Jake was born May 30th, 1955 in Gainesville, Texas. And he goes on to be known as Jake Roberts in the world of professional wrestling, but that's not the way he was born. His real name, Bruce, is
Aurelian Smith Jr.
What a first name. Wouldn't you agree? It even sounds like a reptile, does it not?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Well, wow. I'm not even going to comment on that.
So Jake,
because he was a junior.
There you
Just
go.
saying.
Jake is of course best known for his time in the WWF, but he worked all over. And, I guess he wrestled for like 8 years before he ever made his way to the company in around 86. When did you first meet Jake? Do you remember?
The first time that I ever met Jake was probably 1985 or 1986. 85 is when Jake came in to work for Bill Watts in the Mid-South Territory. And I'd obviously watched Jake on the Superstation WTBS. That was the Saturday evening show. So I was familiar with him, knew he was Grizzly's son, but hadn't met him, hadn't been around him before.
So chat me up a little bit about the reputation that Jake had coming into the business, because Jake comes from a wrestling family. His dad is Grizzly Smith. And of course, he passed away in June of 2010, but he was, a wrestler from the good old days, the 60s and 70s, and then went on to work in a backstage capacity for both the WWF and then a road agent with WCW. And if you've paid any attention to Jake's life story, they had sort of an interesting relationship. What did you know of Jake and his relationship with his dad, the reputation that carried? Can you chat me up about that?
Truthfully, a lot of that reputation and a lot of the story, that wasn't that widely known back in the day. A lot of that didn't come out until much later. Now, Grizzly had his own, stories about him, so on and so forth. But I knew Grizzly first because Grizzly was an agent for Bill Watts, and Grizzly was the guy that ran the towns for Bill Watts in the Louisiana and Oklahoma territory. I'll tell you a quick story about Grizzly Smith. I grew up in Houston, Texas, but I was born in El Paso. My first exposure to wrestling in El Paso was the Amarillo territory with the Funks, and Grizzly Smith was there. But Harley Race Grizzly did this gimmick where he had an iron stomach, and he used to let people jump on his stomach and break things on his stomach to show how tough he was and how hard his stomach was. So Harley Race said, well, you know what? If I came off of a ladder onto your stomach, you wouldn't be able to sustain that. And Grizzly said, go ahead. And they put a ladder in the ring, and Harley climbs up to the top of the ladder, and Harley comes off the ladder and drops the knee right across Grizzly's neck and broke his neck and made him retire from wrestling. No more Grizzly Smith. His career was over. Now, I'm 5 years old. I'm a kid. I'm 5 years old, and I'm crying because Grizzly Smith is never going to wrestle again. And then we moved to Houston. And when I got to Houston, there was Grizzly Smith wrestling again. And lo and behold, he had come back from a miraculous broken neck in Houston. The only difference is it wasn't Harley Race who came off a ladder on him. It was Johnny Valentine who came off the top rope onto Grizzly's neck. So now I'm, 5, 6 years old and kind of scratching my head. And that was the first time that it kind of crept into my little skull that, wait a minute, this may not all be what they say it is on TV, because Grizzly couldn't be that stupid to let Johnny Valentine do that after Harley Race broke his neck in El Paso.
So did you know that Jake was estranged from Grizzly? Like, did you know they had sort of a weird relationship? You meet Jake, or what did you know about the relationship at the time?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And when Jake came in, he traveled with Grizzly on the road. So there was no, nothing that would even make you feel like there was an estrangement at that time. They, traveled together, they worked together, and Jake came in, didn't come in on top. Jake kind of came in the middle of the card, but he was, just so smooth and so damn good in the ring that he quickly moved his way up the card.
Do I have the story right that Jake was conceived when Grizzly was dating Jake's grandmother and decided to have sex with Jake's mother, who was 13 at the time? And so technically Grizzly had sex with his girlfriend's daughter, and now Jake is here. Do I have that right?
I believe that is correct. Yes. Yeah. And then he went on to marry her.
Well, were they forced? Was it one of those shotgun weddings? I mean, is that just what you did back then when you knocked up a 13-year-old?
I guess so. Different time, different place. And in Louisiana, I guess all bets are off sometimes back in the 50s. Well, I guess it was 50s. Yeah.
Given that, when did that story come out? Do you remember, like you said, a lot of this didn't come out at the time. It wasn't widely known. When did that become like common knowledge in the wrestling business, and how were people okay with employing a guy like that?
I don't remember it really coming out until Grizzly had kind of moved on from really being in the business actively. Now, Grizzly had the reputation, the rumor and innuendo, if you will, of liking young girls, underage girls. So that was the reputation, and that was the rumor and innuendo and kind of take on Grizzly. So there may have been, the old timers that may have known that story. But for me, I never heard it until much later on after I'd known Jake for a while.
It's one of those really weird stories in wrestling that I feel like everybody knows, but it almost feels like everybody sort of turned a blind eye to, and he was still allowed to be in the business because he was good at his job. Would that be the assessment that a lot of promoters had back in the day?
I think back in the day, it was a weird, I think that,
like it's bad
if I don't see it, it didn't happen.
Right. And
so they close their eyes.
There's this weird like this whole subject is so ridiculous, but there's this weird, like at the time, I'm sure, well, I know he fucked a 13-year-old, but I mean, he made an honest woman out of her and married her.
That's just sick.
Like
to me, that
somehow
I don't
made
see how
it.
you justify that.
Yeah. It's a weird deal.
I don't know how you justify that. And I think that you can't. I mean, it's
the dumbest logic ever, but the idea that we turned a rape into a marriage, it's like, what?
Right.
How is this possible? But that's wrestling, I guess. We should mention too, that Jake has pointed to a lot of this craziness, as you may imagine, as some of the reasons that he had some substance challenges, and his sister apparently really had a hard time dealing with this and developed a lot of mental problems. And when she was 18, she married a guy who was like more than 30 years older than her. And, she wound up murdered and kidnapped. Did you hear this story as well? I mean, is this more common knowledge since it happens much later in life? Is that still something that's a whisper campaign, or are people talking about?
Well, for me, I didn't hear it until I just got closer to Jake much later on. And it was, that was a sad story because you had the underlying current, but no one knew the abuse going on in the family at that time. Those weren't things that you discuss. That wasn't real. You know what I mean? You hear that shit about in the movies and on TV that they make up and they tell stories about. That's not something that really happens. And it was. So nobody really talked about it because it wasn't something like, Jake or Grizzly came in and talked about abuse.
It's worth mentioning that Grizzly did have two more children, Michael and Robin. Michael would go on to become Sam Houston and wrestle in both the WWF and the NWA. And he later married Baby Doll. And, Robin, of course, became Rockin' Robin in the WWF and actually won the women's title, which we briefly touched on last week in Survivor Series 87. You may remember her as well. National anthem, and I believe WrestleMania 5. Was that right?
WrestleMania 4.
And she has spoken publicly.
Oh shit. You are right. I'm sorry. 5.
About how she too was sexually abused by her father when she was like 6 or 7 years old. This just continues to become more and more depressing. Is this something that people know about when Robin's a part of the company, or does this come out much later as well?
No, came out much later.
So this whole relationship with Grizzly and the WWF and Jake and Robin and Sam Houston, do you know how every WWF?
Well, Jake went first and Jake left, from Mid-South. Jake went first. And from there, Grizzly got the opportunity, and Grizzly didn't last. I don't even think Grizzly lasted a year. He may have, but Grizzly went up, and then Robin came shortly thereafter. Sam came up at the same time too. Sam came up in like September, October of 1987. Right in that time frame. But the reason, everybody knows these stories. I think it's because of
Beyond the
Wrestling
Mat.
with Shadows. Yeah, Beyond the Mat. But this wasn't something everybody knew and talked about. This wasn't well known.
Well, you told us a story in the Survivor Series episode about Sherry and Moolah. Do you have any Rockin' Robin stories you can share with us? I don't know when we'll talk about her again.
No, I think that the funniest Rockin' Robin story was her just telling us that she could sing, and Vince going, "Great, we'll make a singer out of her. She'll sing America the Beautiful. It'll be great. Then we'll do records and albums." I don't think anybody heard her sing until she belted it out that day. And she wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't Aretha Franklin or anybody else like that.
What about Sam Houston? We're not going to give Sam much love on the show here. I'm sure he's not winning a poll anytime soon, but what memories do you have of Sam Houston? Any good little stories you can share?
Yeah, I remember Mike coming in, and he came into the Mid-South a little bit after Jake did. The the feeling at that time, because Mike was a lot smaller, he was very skinny. He was tall. He had good height and everything, but he hadn't really filled out a lot, and Jake had a different type of body. Jake was tall, didn't have a bodybuilder's physique, but he looked like a tough guy. I mean, he had a pretty big physique, and Mike was just tall and slender. So the feeling was nobody's really going to take him seriously because he looks like a tall, skinny cowboy. And there were a lot of people that felt that him coming into the Mid-South at the time was a case of nepotism because of Grizzly bringing him in. So I don't think Watts really wanted to do anything with him because of his size. And later on, when Jim Crockett bought the Mid-South territory, Mike was gone. Sam Houston was gone, moved on to the WWF, where he had a short little stint there for a while. But he didn't do a whole lot in the business. He was kind of a journeyman, I guess.
Jake starts his career in 74 as both a referee and a wrestler. He's working Mid-Atlantic, Mid-South, and Georgia. And then in the late 70s, he goes to Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling and starts a feud with Big Daddy Ritter, who we know as the Junkyard Dog. And actually wins the Stampede North American title in April of 79. And Jake says that Stampede was the place to go to learn. And he got to learn how to main event because of his matches with JYD. And he says that was sort of the blind leading the blind, and they had no idea what they were doing. But he winds up becoming roommates with Bret Hart. And these guys are sort of honing their craft together. And Bret is working Dynamite Kid every night. And Jake thinks that Dynamite was helping bring Bret along in those matches. A lot of people credit Stampede in this era for being a place that helped them really hone their craft and then become the performer we know in the WWF. Did you ever have a conversation with Jake about his time in Stampede and how critical that was to his development?
Well, yeah, because it was a go-to place. And the beautiful thing about Calgary was location. It was a place that the Japanese promotions could send young talent over to learn in Canada and work with Stu Hart and work with a lot of people. The guys from the States like to go up there and work. The money was good during the time. But out of that, you look at those two stars, and Jake Roberts and JYD, that were young, and Stu saw it then. And say the same thing for Bret Hart, but then again, it was his daddy's company. Jake was great. Even then, man, he had that simple, no wasted movement in the ring with Jake, even going back into the early days.
We should mention that during Jake's time in Mid-South, he does have some success winning the North American title from the Grappler in 81. He eventually loses it to Paul Orndorff. And then he goes to Georgia Championship Wrestling in 83 and eventually becomes a part of the Legion of Doom faction managed by Paul Ellering. And Bruce, this has been out there for years. Rumor and innuendo from Jake himself that he actually named the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. Any truth to that?
I'm going with it. I've heard it from Jake, and it actually went back, and there was a point. I bet you that it's on one of the Road Warriors DVDs or what have you. But Jake is in a promo with Paul Ellering and the Road Warriors, and he looks around and he goes, "Well, we're just the Legion of Doom," and voila, it was born, and that's how they just continued to refer to themselves. So yeah, I'm going to give Jake credit on that one. That came out in a promo. I've seen the promo, and I want to say that it's on one of the Road Warrior compilation videos.
We should mention that Jake has always maintained that he hated working for Bill Watts, but he thought that the Mid-South territory was a great place to learn because you were working so often. Did you ever talk to Jake about his opinion of Bill Watts, why he didn't get along with him? Is it because of Watts' reputation as a bully, or the schedule, or the pay, or what do you know about his relationship with Bill?
Yep. All the above. Bill was difficult to deal with. And I don't know that Bill had a whole lot of respect for Jake for whatever reason. And Jake didn't have a whole lot of respect for Bill, but yet they needed each other. Jake was drawing money and Jake was doing well in the territory, especially when he came back in the late 80s. He was, really becoming an attraction. So Bill needed him. And that was at a time that Vince had started to really expand, and Vince was luring all this talent away. And you got a guy on top in Jake the Snake. Bill didn't want him to leave. So he's got, Bill has to put up with Jake. Jake's making decent money. He's going to put up with Bill for a while until he decides to make the move to go to New York. But the greatest thing about Jake in the Mid-South is you go back and you look at, to me, a couple of the talent that he made during that time. One was Nord the Barbarian, John Nord, who Vern Gagne had sent down to the Mid-South area to work for Bill Watts, get on the road, get him out every night, wrestling matches. And Bill put Nord with Jake, made him a team. So every night you got Jake out there with John, and he's calming him down. Now, people may remember John Nord, the Barbarian, as the Berserker in the WWF in later years. But, man, at this time, John was just a big, strapping, jacked up, crazy man. And when I say crazy man, I've been with a lot of crazy guys through the years. Nord is at the top of the list. Great guy. Love him to death. Absolutely love him to death. But he's crazy. And Jake was able to take him, slow him down, teach him night in and night out. And also during that time, there was a guy by the name of Jeff Van Camp who came in as not Lord Humongous. He just came in as Humongous. And in my opinion, he's the best Humongous that the business ever had. He worked the gimmick, and that was all due to Jake, and Jake teaching him psychology and telling him what to do every night, every second of every match.
According to the testimony from Jake, we've heard over the years that he has the idea for Jake the Snake as a gimmick and pitches it to Watts, but Watts sort of shit all over it, saying something like, "This isn't a goddamn carnival." Do you recall Watts having some sort of aversion to gimmicks like that? And had you heard that story before?
Watts had an aversion to all gimmicks. Watts wasn't a gimmick guy, hated gimmicks. He liked big, rough and tough. This guy's an NCAA champion. He was 4-time All-American. Didn't matter if it was at chess or whatever. It's like, oh, damn, this is a tough son of a bitch. He can kick your ass. Can't draw a dime. He can kick your ass, though. And Bill didn't like gimmicks. And it wasn't, Jake was just Jake the Snake, man. He moved like a snake. He was a snake. Don't trust me. So, and I really think that Bill hated that Jake got over the way that he did. And then later on, Jake was over so strong as a heel that he immediately, when he turned, just turned into a top babyface. The audience turned him.
Well, he was over like Rover in Georgia too. He beat Ronnie Garvin for the TV title there, and they had a feud back and forth. And while he's in Georgia, he winds up becoming roommates. Check this out, guys. Jake the Snake Roberts in the same house with the Road Warriors, and at times Nikita Koloff and Rick Rude. Is this like the real Dungeon of Doom or what?
Yeah, I mean, who's going to piss who off on that? Jake's low man on the totem pole there as far as just kind of badassery. But then Jake would be on the high end of the totem pole when it would come to manipulation and spinning and getting everybody to do whatever the hell he wanted them to do.
There's, I guess a legend out there that Jake actually started a book in Georgia. Did you hear that Jake was actually helping write some TV in Georgia?
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. I could always see Jake. Jake was one of those guys that wasn't shy about giving his ideas, and his ideas were good. So, I could see them picking his brain and being able to utilize him to help book.
He worked with Chris Adams in World Class. They battled for the TV title and then even teamed together with Gino Hernandez to take on the Von Erichs. Lots of fun stories about those guys in our Houston episode you've just got to hear. We should also mention that it's kind of interesting the way wrestling is such a small world, because we talked about Jake having a partnership and wrestling Chris Adams. Well, eventually, of course, Chris Adams will go on to train Steve Austin, and we all know how Austin 316 came to be. It's a small world. Eventually, we get an opportunity to see Jake working with Nord the Barbarian that you talked about, Lord Humongous, Jeff Van Camp, all the guys in the Mid-South territory, before finally in late 86, he winds up signing with the WWF. We know you didn't start until right after WrestleMania 3 in 87, but when you see him show up on TV in 86 for Vince, is it a surprise that he made it to the big stage?
Absolutely not. And Jake was working obviously for Mid-South before he went up there. And I'll tell you a funny story. One of Jake's, one of his last matches before he went up to New York, and Jake told, he gave Bill notice. He didn't walk out on Bill. He told Bill, "Hey, I'm going to New York and, I'm leaving." So it wasn't a screw thing or anything like that. And Jake been working a program with Dick Slater. Dick Slater had been, or was the North American champion. So they were going around and Jake was putting Slater over for the last little run before, Jake goes to New York. And
I should mention timeline wise, that's February of 86. I said late 86 a minute ago. Jake debuted in March of 86. So he's finishing up here with Slater in February.
Right. And so they get around, and there was a newspaper article who's actually a friend of mine now, as much as I hate to admit it, by the name of Ken Hoffman, that worked for the Houston Post. And he did an article, and the day of the show in Houston, Hoffman wrote an article, "Don't bet on Jake the Snake to win the North American Championship tonight, because he's going to work for Vince McMahon's WWF next month, and he won't be around anymore. So Dick Slater, put all your money on Dick Slater to win tonight." Which in 1986, man, that's blasphemy. You don't print that in a paper. You don't say those things in public, and that could get you hurt. One of those situations. So Paul Bosch, being the wrestling promoter that he is, and Bill Watts, hating anyone that would actually try to expose the business, by God, we're going to show him. And we had Jake beat Slater in Houston on that Friday night for the North American Championship. And then we cut a promo in the back with Jake with the championship and the article, the newspaper article from Ken Hoffman, and just blasting Hoffman verbally, and that aired on the show. And Hoffman was terrified, still is to this day, and he still blames me for doing it. But at the same time, I thought it was good business. And then Jake took his merry way on to New York, and we all knew he was going. And I still stayed in touch with Jake after he, went to New York. So just kind of keeping tabs and what the hell was going on.
So once he actually debuts, it's not too long that, obviously he's working a match at WrestleMania 2, but I think what people most remember from Jake in 86 is the DDT on the floor on Saturday night's main event against Ricky Steamboat. If you haven't seen that, go out of your way to find the footage. It's something else. Did you watch this live? Did you know how fucked Ricky was when that first happened?
No, I didn't. It was great DDT. Looked good for the business. So no, I had no idea how bad he was really hurt.
Let's talk about the DDT itself. When do you first remember that becoming a thing? Obviously it was one of, if not the hottest finisher in the 80s. I guess we should just say, in your opinion, is that the most badass finish of the 80s?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. So simple. He could hit it out of anywhere. He could do it to anybody. And how Jake named the DDT was rat poison. Rat poison. The name of the rat poison was DDT, and it would like instantly kill a rat. So the way it was instantaneous, the way Jake would snap it on somebody, he named it DDT. One of the best, to me, the coolest shirt, especially during that time when everybody's wrestling shirts were a picture of themselves, smiling baby face, and that was wrestling shirts back in the time. Jake's was, I believe it was a Rod Stewart tour, and the name of it was Cruel But Fair. So we took the Cruel But Fair and then stamped DDT across it. And so it was big letters, was DDT over Cruel But Fair. That was kind of Jake's tagline, the DDT, it's cruel but fair. And my God, the t-shirt sales were absolutely wonderful. And we tried to get a station here in Houston to do a song. Remember the song by Dire Straits, I Want My MTV?
Yeah, I Want My DDT.
We wrote it. Jake and I sat there. We wrote it out, and we were going to have them do. It was Captain Leonard and Cleat Dumpster and all these guys, but it was I want my DDT, and part of the song, which is edited out now, but there was a lyric in the song about the little faggot with the earring and the makeup. Yeah, buddy, that's his own hair. Well, Oliver Humperdinck was a heel manager in Mid-South at the time. And so Jake, we had all this stuff around Humperdinck and it was great. But by the time that we got them to do it, Jake was gone and he was on his way out. So we didn't have him record it and do anything with it.
The song you're referencing is Money for Nothing. I'd never actually heard DDT referred to as rat poison. This whole time I thought it was something that like farmers used as like a pesticide for agriculture purposes.
Yeah, but it's poison.
Oh, sure. And my favorite Jake line is whenever someone would ask, what does DDT stand for? Do you remember the answer?
No.
The
Don't
end.
trust anybody. What?
The end. I just
like
love that. That's cool. So I guess we should talk about the gimmick itself, because when we saw Jake prior to the WWF, he had on a different type of boots and he certainly wasn't wearing those style tights and he wasn't carrying a snake. Have you ever heard how Vince McMahon pitched Jake on this character that we know and love as Jake the Snake Roberts?
I have. I heard, it's funny. I've heard Jake's version of it. I've heard Vince's version of it. Vince saw him as a snake. And that's what Vince wanted. He wanted Jake the Snake, but he wanted a living, breathing human snake in Jake. So hence the green trunks or the green tights and the snakeskin boots and all this other stuff. And of course, carrying the snake. And actually, Jake the Snake would have a snake. So that was part of it. And it's funny, we did the show on Bobby Heenan, and I went back and listened to Bobby Heenan's Hall of Fame induction, where he talks about all the animals in the World Wildlife Fund and how when he was in the WWF before, you had the bulldog, you had a guy carrying a snake, and what a zoo it was. But that's what Vince saw, man. Vince saw Jake the Snake is a living, breathing snake. And that's how he saw it. Jake saw it more in the promos and more in the style in the ring. And he liked his baggy karate pants, and he was lazy. Didn't like lacing up his boots. So he wore pull-on boots from Austin Hall Boot Company. And Vince, said, okay, well, I need a guy that is going to be a snake for me. Jake thought about it. I was like, okay, I guess I will lace up my boots and wear green tights and carry a snake around. And I think it worked out pretty good for him.
When they were first discussing the character, was Vince in the loop on what the finish was? Like, did he know that Jake was using the DDT and that was one of the reasons he wanted him, because the finish was so over?
No, I'm sure he did. I mean, he knew who Jake was and he wanted Jake, and Jake had been using the DDT for a while. So I don't know if that was a big part of it. He loved the character.
Let me ask this. Hypothetically, if Jake had said, you know what, I don't want to wear these neon tights and snakeskin boots. I want to wear my karate pants, and I damn sure don't want to carry a snake to the ring. Do you think if Vince would have found someone else to play this character, they too would have used the DDT as just like a fuck you to Jake?
No, probably not. Probably would have done whatever their character was. I don't know.
Do you believe that Jake is the creator of the DDT?
In my mind, yeah. I don't know of anybody else that ever used it before him.
Certainly not as effectively. When you took the DDT on the Brother Love show, how do you properly take a DDT?
Pancake. Just pancake out. Flatten out. Flatten out, turn your head. That's simple. It's one of the simplest bumps in the world to take, but guys, in my opinion, take it wrong all the time. If you listen to Jake and you go with Jake, you ain't getting hurt.
Obviously, though, that didn't work out for Ricky Steamboat. Do you remember any other guys taking the DDT wrong and really injuring themselves?
For some reason, guys like to spear the mat with their heads. And to me, that wasn't what the DDT was about. The DDT was about when Jake hit it, that he flattened you out. And when you hit on the initial impact, man, you just went dead, basically limp. And that was the beauty of the DDT. When guys would try and jump up and spear their head into the mat, it didn't look right to me. And there were guys that would do the DDT differently. And first of all, nobody did the DDT like Jake, in my opinion. He just was so quick, so smooth, so good that it was hard to copy. Guys tried, but that's just what it was, copy.
Obviously the DDT doesn't mean as much now as it did then. And one of the reasons is it was so well protected. Is there some sort of conversation with the other performers about what moves they're allowed to do or not to do? Or is it just common courtesy back then that if it's a guy's finish, that means you can't do it?
Well, first of all, it's professional courtesy in that you don't use somebody else's finish as a high spot. No, you just don't do that. And back in the early days, guys didn't do that. Then people started using finishes and people kicking out of everybody else's finishes. And I think it dilutes the match and dilutes the individuality of talent when everybody's using the same moves. And that was the beauty of, in my opinion, the WWF back in the day, was everybody was different. And you didn't just see everybody doing the same stuff. The only difference a lot of times is that you see different guys doing the same stuff. So, no, it's just common courtesy. You didn't use somebody else's finish. You sure didn't use it as a high spot and kick out.
Can you tell us, anything about the Steamboat DDT on the floor? I know it happened before you were there, but were guys still talking about that? Did you ever hear from Jake or Ricky or any of the agents that night about that particular incident we referenced?
No, not really, because that's just in my opinion, I think it's a freak accident because I never knew Jake to ever hurt anybody before that and or after that with that move.
Obviously, they did big business with it. The WWF runs a huge event called the Big Event in front of 74,000 folks in August of '86 in Toronto, and Steamboat would beat Jake in what they called a snake pit match. And of course, they had another snake pit match the next month in September on Saturday night's main event. And towards the end of '86, they even give Jake his own talk show, The Snake Pit, which is obviously based off of Roddy Piper's Pit. That goes until July of '87. So you weren't really there for a lot of those. But what did you think about Jake in this role? Because it's certainly a departure. I mean, he's a phenomenal talker, so I get that logic, but he can't really be this mysterious snake man if he's out here in Coogee sweaters talking to everybody, right?
I hated it. And here's the reason I hated it. A few reasons. First of all, Jake was so damn tall. Plus he wore cowboy boots,
which made him 3 inches taller.
Yes. So he towered over a lot of the talent. And Jake was such a good talker, such a great promo, that he really outshined everybody that he was interviewing on the show. And to me, it just kind of took away. I didn't think that it played to Jake's strong points, because Jake's strong points were all about telling a story about him and his opponent. To me, I just didn't think it worked. I didn't think it clicked.
One of the other things that Jake references a lot is in late 86, I guess December, and then in January and February of 87, Hulk Hogan worked a few house show matches against Jake Roberts for the world title. And Jake says that he kind of understood that they were headed towards a Jake Roberts Hulk Hogan feud, but all of a sudden those plans are changed because Jake started to get cheered in their matches because the snake pit was over and the DDT is super over. So when he DDTs Hogan, the fans pop and they're chanting for the move. Now this happens right before you were there, but it's always been sort of understood to me that for whatever reason, and maybe this is it, Jake was not the world's biggest Hulk Hogan fan. Do you remember this stop and start program or hearing about it?
I remember hearing about it. I never understood why they didn't go with Hulk and Jake, because I think that it would have made money. And Jake was over, the move was over, but the snake, Damien, was over more than all of them put together. So therein lies the problem. People were cheering for Jake and the DDT as a heel because they knew they were going to get to see Damien.
Right.
That's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see that big, nasty snake come out and slither all over somebody's unconscious body. So we had to pull that back and say, okay, wait a minute, man. They're popping, for the snake. And yes, every bit of that is true. Jake was over, the move was over, but that snake was over all of them. And you had to figure out a way not to give them the snake every night.
In early March, they started to try to turn Jake babyface. They have the Hart Foundation beat Jake and Duggan by DQ. And then later in the same show, Jake and Piper would beat Harley Race and Adrian Adonis. So they're starting to ease him in here, and he starts working house shows against Kamala and the Iron Sheik. But the face turn becomes cemented on the Snake Pit when Honky Tonk Man is there as a guest, and he hits Jake in the head with a match for WrestleMania 3. And Jake says the guitar shot legitimately injured him to the point that his ex-wife was picking pieces of fiberglass splinters out of his back for weeks. And he also says that the shot obliterated and exploded 2 discs in his back. And he said some surgeons had told him that they'd seen guys who'd fell off a 10-story building, but their discs weren't damaged as badly. Jake says the guitar wasn't gimmicked at all. It nearly killed him. And this was all sort of Honky Tonk Man's negligence, or maybe Pat Patterson's, because Jake says that Pat Patterson, sent out to get the guitar, and the guy went to a guitar shop and bought a real guitar. And Honky just flatly denies this and says that this is not a legitimate shot and certainly didn't injure him this bad. And specifically takes issue with Jake saying that these injuries are the main reason that Jake became addicted to prescription pain medication and started using cocaine. What say you? I know this happened before you were there, but I know this guitar shot has been talked about for a long time.
Well, the guitar shot is where they learned 2 gimmick guitars, because when they got first of all, there was no gimmick man. There was no prop person there. It was, I don't know if it was Louis or not. They say it was, probably was. He probably would have been one of the people to go do that at the time. And the guitar had a steel rod from the neck of the guitar to the very back of the guitar. And you're looking at me right now because you're saying to yourself, Bruce, this isn't television, it's radio. But the steel beam ran right down the center of the back of the guitar. So when Honky hit him, he hit him with this steel beam, and they thought, well, it's a really lightweight guitar and it should break fairly easily. And obviously they didn't look internally at the workings of the guitar, and it about broke his neck. So it screwed him up pretty bad. But I Doubt it was intentional. Don't believe that. But it's an unfortunate accident and a hard way to learn that, hey, we need to take these guitars apart, take the steel reinforcement out, and take all the other. If you look inside of a guitar, there's also little pieces of wood that kind of stabilize it and make it solid. Those aren't good when you're going to hit somebody over the head with them.
Nobody thought to gimmick it at all?
I guess not. I wasn't there.
I don't know why.
Dude, they hit each other with chairs. Nobody gimmicked chairs. It was lightweight. They're thinking, this should be all right. But I guess nobody looked inside.
You knew Jake beforehand. Did you know Jake to use cocaine or prescription drugs or Placidils prior to this?
Well, Jake, I could say, was the first person to ever introduce me to a Placidil, the Meanie Greenies. And that was in the Mid-South before he ever went to New York. So, but again, everybody did. I'm not going to say everybody did. I did. There were a lot of guys that did. And a lot of us smoked dope and took pills and partook in extracurricular activity. And as far as I know, yeah, Jake was one of those people that did it beforehand. I don't know if this maybe increased that, because I know he was in pain. He was hurting pretty good.
WrestleMania 3, of course, you weren't there, but the biggest WrestleMania of all time, March 29th, 1987, Pontiac Silverdome, and in his corner is Alice Cooper. This is the reason that people were jumping ship. Big spectacles like this, where you get a mainstream celebrity like Alice Cooper involved, it makes it feel bigger than just traditional wrestling, does it not?
It was a spectacle. It was absolutely insanity. And for Alice Cooper to be a part of that and to come out with Jake. When you look at the celebrity pairings, sometimes some of them are a natural. To me, Jake Roberts and Alice Cooper are an absolute natural.
Right.
And I thought that it was a great pairing, and the damn snake, Alice could barely hold up the snake. It was so big and so heavy, which was also kind of funny.
Do you have any idea what Vince would have paid a celebrity like Alice Cooper at the time to appear? It feels like something Alice would have wanted to participate in, because wrestling was just so hot at the time that it's extra coverage for him. But obviously there's a payday involved.
And it works both ways. I think that there are times that, guys would do it gratis for the exposure. And then there's other people that were only interested in the payday. And Alice may have, probably done it for a little bit of both, but I'm sure he got paid. I have no idea what he got paid.
There was rumor and innuendo around this same time that the plan was for Jake to beat Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental title, and then eventually start an angle with Ted DiBiase. But a lot of these plans go sideways because of the injuries from the guitar shot. Maybe Vince didn't feel like he was up for that schedule. Do you remember hearing any rumors about that? Jake as an IC champ in 87?
No, I don't. And obviously I was there after WrestleMania 3. I don't know if they discussed it prior to WrestleMania 3, but I never remember it being discussed after. Jake was a talent that from day one with Vince that I knew, and being around Vince, that Vince never felt he ever needed a championship. Felt he was an attraction without it, didn't need it.
He worked the main event in April in New Haven in a dark match, tagging with Hulk Hogan and Tito Santana to take on Harley Race, Butch Reed, and the Honky Tonk Man. Worked a match with Bobby Heenan. And then I found this interesting. In July in Glen Falls, he works a match against Honky Tonk Man, and Mr. T is the special enforcer, but it's a dark match. Any memories of this? Why wouldn't you guys put T on TV?
We did. We had T all over TV. The gimmick at the time was we had brought Mr. T back as a special enforcer referee that we would use as attractions in the B towns. You had Hulk in the A towns, and then they had B towns where they would use Mr. T. And a lot of it was, there was an issue with Honky Tonk Man, so that T worked a lot of the honky stuff, but also I want to say, now it wasn't Savage. But then again, it may have been Savage. I think Savage was the other heel, but we just used Mr. T in an attraction role.
August 15th in Boston, there's an elimination match with Bruno Sammartino tagging with Tito Santana and Jake the Snake against the Hart Foundation and the Honky Tonk Man. What are your memories of working with Bruno in 87?
You know, Bruno is an extremely nice man. Very, very nice, very respectful. He's Bruno Sammartino, man. He's a living legend. Bruno hated what the wrestling business had become. He was not a fan of Hulk. He was not a fan of gimmicks. He wanted wrestling to be the way that it was in 1960. Bruno was one of those guys that would lead you to believe that all of his matches that he won were real. If he ever lost a match, that was the promoter came to me and that was, that wasn't on the up and up. But if he won, that was real. He actually really won. But a nice guy. And Bruno just didn't like Vince McMahon. And there just was always a little bit of friction, a little bit of tension. And the only reason at this period in his life, I felt that Bruno was even in the business was so that his son David could be in the business.
Let's talk a little bit about what Jake is doing after this of interest. September 4th, we're in Providence and we're at the King of the Ring. This was before it was on TV. Jake would work with Honky Tonk Man and get a win by count out. So of course, Honky retains the IC. Through the rest of 87, Jake has an interesting lineup of opponents. He's working with Volkov, Rip Oliver, Sika, Killer Khan, Dino Bravo, Hercules. He's all over the place. He even works a battle royal that he wins in East Rutherford on November 16th. And on the same show, he's working with Killer Khan. We've talked about Killer Khan once before, but I feel like Killer Khan and Jake the Snake Roberts put on one of the most old school wrestling matches of all time. Would that be fair to say?
I would think between Khan's Green Mist and Jake's Snake that was the match.
I mean, that is some Southern wrestling stuff. It sounds like it's right out of Memphis.
Killer Khan versus Jake the Snake Roberts. You gotta love the ring to that.
Well, November 24th, he's working Madison Square Garden against Danny Davis. I mean, this guy's running the gauntlet. And of course, we covered Survivor Series 87. Jake winds up pinning Davis there, and he goes on with Steamboat and Savage to be the sole survivors on their show, which is, I guess, kind of funny that there's 3 sole survivors. After that, he finds himself working with DiBiase, and DiBiase is usually going over. They do a return to the Pontiac Silverdome in November on the 29th. And I don't think that gets enough coverage. After the huge show you have at WrestleMania, somebody says, well, shit, let's go back to the well. So you guys go back on November 29th. What are your memories of running the Silverdome the second time in 87?
Well, it wasn't a big show. It was just to run. The Pontiac Silverdome was just another arena, and they could scale it down to like a much smaller building, but it wasn't, hey, let's go in and draw another 93,000. They knew it was going to be back to, like a 10,000 seat venue at that point.
Does that not feel really depressing if you're one of the performers to go out there and have 100,000 people? I mean, not really, but we'll talk about that another time. And then later, 10,000 folks. 10,000 folks is a hell of a house anywhere except the Pontiac Silverdome.
Well, no, I mean, not yes and no. And I remember for TNA, and this is going to sound crazy, we ran the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, and we scaled it down to roughly 5,000 people. And believe it or not, it actually looked and sounded good. Now, the fact that the rest of the building was absolutely cavernous, they had perfected in later years a way to make these big stadiums to seat, small venues, make it look 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, scale it to whatever your event was going to draw. It wasn't that bad. And they'd give you good deals on it.
I don't know why, but that's funny to me. It wasn't that bad. He's all over the place, and it doesn't feel like when I look at these results that the company really knows what to do with him. He beat Sika on Saturday night's main event, and then he's working with Steve Lombardi, Mr. Fuji. He's doing double countouts with One Man Gang. It feels like he's sort of all over the place and doesn't really have a feud right around Survivor Series through the end of the year. I know he pinned Danny Davis and he was working some matches with him, but it feels like he's a little bit of a ship without a sail. In this era, are guys sort of complaining about their spot and what they're doing creatively? Or is everybody making so much fucking money for the first time in professional wrestling that they're just happy to be on the card?
In a lot of respects, guys were happy to be a part of the company and guys were happy to be a part of it. The buildings were selling out. You would just put, hey, WWF is coming to town. We were doing great business all over the place, and guys were making money. They were making more money than they ever had. Half of a house was more money than they were making anywhere else in any other territory in the country. So at that point, yeah, you're a part of the show. And I think that there was a little bit of, what are we going to do with Jake? And this was also a period where they were going with, Hulk and Andre, and the title was going to be up for grabs. So it just was a lot of shit up in the air. There weren't a lot of issues and angles at this time other than, Hulk Andre, Hulk DiBiase, and a little bit underneath. It wasn't a whole lot of.
It's not like today.
Like it is now.
Yeah. Where everybody has some sort of issue. You just had a series of matches and that was enough to draw a house. You had the big stars and you saw them in competitive matches. And then you saw, a blood feud or a really heated rivalry, maybe once or twice a show.
Right. It was all about the stars. It was all about the production of the WWF coming to your town.
So after the first of the year, he finds himself working a lot with Jake the Snake or with Ted DiBiase. DiBiase's going over and he's trading wins with Rick Rude. He even finds himself working a few matches with Harley Race. And then we get to the Royal Rumble. And he's in the Rumble. This is the very first one, 88. We're going to cover it in long form next month, so stay tuned for that. He's still got the bag of gimmicks for opponents here for the rest of 87 on our way to WrestleMania 4. And here, Jake's in the world title tournament. He's going to wrestle Rick Rude to a 15-minute time limit draw, and both men were eliminated from the tournament when this happens. Did you guys know, or when did you guys know, hey, we're going with Rude and Jake? Of course, we know what's coming, but would this be a decision that you guys would have made around the time of the Royal Rumble, or how far in advance was something like that thought out?
Vince and Pat were doing the creative at that time, and they would plant seeds and see how somebody meshed in the ring. So I believe that they knew way back when, but it was also something, from my recollection, that Jake and Rude both kind of thought, hey man, there's something here. They had chemistry, they had good matches, and it was a natural, Rude doing his thing. And I felt like it was just an absolute natural rivalry.
About a month after WrestleMania 4, we would see maybe one of the first times this happened, Andre work a match with Jake the Snake. Andre got the win here. How did Andre enjoy working with Jake?
I think Andre hated Jake pretty much. And Andre used to, if you go back and you watch those matches, there would be spots in the matches where Jake would be on the mat and Andre would stand on his hair and reach down and grab Jake's arms and then pull him up while still standing on his hair and just laugh. And he thought that was the funniest shit ever. Andre could torture you if he wanted to, but this was during the time that we did the whole Snake and Andre having the heart attack and all that good junk.
On April 23rd, this edition of Superstars, Rick Rude would choose a woman from the crowd to kiss. And of course it winds up being Jake's wife, Cheryl. So she slaps him, and Jake comes out, and these guys start fighting. Of course, we covered this whole angle on our Ravishing Rick Rude episode, which is available in the archives. But Jake said that Rude told him that Cheryl actually hits harder than Jake does because the slap busts his eardrum. And Jake says it was the company's idea to have Cheryl travel with him because they thought it would help Jake after coming out of rehab. But he says it didn't help because she didn't want to be on the road or on camera. A lot to cover here. What did you think of dealing with Cheryl? Was she easy to work with? Did the company and the boys enjoy her? What did Vince see in Cheryl? Tell us how that all came to be.
Oh, she's a beautiful woman, first of all, and very nice. It was real. I think that people could relate to it with Cheryl, and the whole, idea, it's funny talking about the ear slap. I think that the best way to guarantee having your eardrum busted is telling someone who's never hit anybody, whatever you do, don't cup your hand and hit my ear. And of course, that's what they always do. They cup their hand and usually burst an eardrum. But Cheryl was, she was really nice. Like I said, beautiful and easy to work with. She was very nervous, just absolutely out of her element. So when, we got out there, she was comfortable with Rude. She was comfortable, obviously, with Jake. She was comfortable with me. We did, a lot of stuff together, and we got her to the point where she could perform, and she got into it after a while. I don't think she was bad at all.
Let's talk about Jake saying the company wanted Cheryl to be on the road with him because he was out of rehab. What do you remember about Jake going to rehab in 87, 88?
Man, he was messed up. He flunked the drug test. I believe he flunked it for cocaine, and he was out of control, absolutely out of control, and partying every night, hitting it hard. It became a problem, but he did flunk, and Vince really wanted to salvage Jake Roberts. So they thought, okay, here's one way to do it. If your wife is on the road, you're less likely to get into trouble. Let's try this, but also while we're doing this, it's an added expense. Let's make some money on it. Let's make her a character. Let's make her a part of the show. And so there, it's a twofold situation where, hey man, she's going to be on the road, hopefully help him stay straight, and also be a character. We'll make some money on it.
Jake has said that when he was away and trying to, sort of clean up his act, he became obsessed with drinking coffee and working out. And he took a shortcut or two and gave himself a little extra dose of vitamins, brother. And supposedly, when Vince sees him after his newfound dedication to lifting weights, Vince is not really excited at all the extra mass that Jake had put on, because that's not what he wanted for Jake's character. Do you remember hearing this story? This is one that Jake has told a few times, but I don't know that it's really mainstream.
I've heard the story, and I've heard it's like, what the hell? Not what is Jake doing in the gym? It's the snake needs to look like a snake. And part of Jake's appeal was that he didn't look like a damn bodybuilder. So you wanted guys to look differently and be their character. So I can definitely see that conversation taking place without a doubt. That's an easy one. I don't ever remember Jake getting to the point where somebody had to say, easy, pal, stop working out there.
Well, I'm sure Jake says it tongue in cheek, but allegedly he sort of freestyles that he had Hogan-esque musculature at the time, which I think is
funny. So did Brother Love. And Ben said, God damn it, pal. Bruce, you need to ease up on the weights there, pal. You're getting too ripped and too jacked. I need Brother Love to be more portly and plump and more Pillsbury dough-like. You goddamn, pal. Yeah, it's the same thing. I had that same issue, man, all the time.
You're outshining our star.
Yeah, that's why I don't work out. You know, I couldn't. Pat Patterson and I had the theory that that's why Vince kept us around. We made him look good.
Well, it's why you do a podcast with me.
Yes,
I make you look good in every way.
Go.
Yeah. So chat me up about Cheryl, because as I said, Jake sort of believes that the company wanted her there to sort of keep him out of trouble. Is anybody having some sort of communication or dialogue with Cheryl about how to sort of handle Jake during this time?
No, I don't think so. I think that it was, you put her in that place, and her just being there in and of itself is going to be a deterrent. It's going to be a deterrent to keep him from, going out and hopefully hanging out in the bars and maybe hooking up with other women and just being in an element that's going to be unhealthy to his rehabilitation. I don't think anybody had to have that conversation, but at the same time, wasn't privy to it, but I could see Vince McMahon sitting both of them down and saying, all right, straighten your shit up. And Cheryl, you're out on the road. I'm looking for your help here.
We told the story on the Rick Rude podcast, but I feel like we should tell it again here. I don't think that the situation that happened with a fan in the ring getting a kiss from Rick Rude was Cheryl. We sort of alluded to the fact that it was a fan. Where was Cheryl during that time? And I guess just retell that story, because maybe everybody listening hasn't heard our Rick Rude episode.
Well, there was rumor and innuendo that there was a young lady that was chosen out of the audience that might have delivered some fellatio to one of the talent in the backstage area previous to going into the ring and locking lips and mouth with one Prichard Rude. So yeah, that was the story. But she wasn't just a fan, that she was an enthusiastic, how would you say, how would like a fellatio artist, what would you call them? I know. Oh, whore! She's a whore.
I think my favorite part of that is when you said delivered fellatio. Like, does Uber Eats do that? Like, is that a thing?
No, I think Grub South does, though. I mean, maybe if you get, I'd like a little extra turkey. I'd like 32 wings and a side of fellatio, please. Delivered up on top of the hill at Monsanto Mountain.
I really feel like of course I want to make everything a shirt, but I don't know that we could make a shirt that looks like the box of gimmicks and it just have like the little kiss imprint and it's got like the special stamp and it says fellatio delivery.
Oh Lord, no.
But thankfully, we can deliver you a lot of other really cool shirts. Cruise on over to bruceprichard.com. And when you get there, you're going to see that we've even got some new stuff that we didn't have last time we talked to you. Most incredibly, it's the Doot fanny pack and the I Used to Be Over beanie, just in time for winter. These are going to be at the top of every wrestling fan's list, are they not?
They already are, along with the new I Used to Be Over shirt and my new favorite, I'm Over. But I gotta love my new beanies and the Doot fanny pack. And the Doot fanny pack has already gone out to its namesake and several others that you will see sporting that all over the place. And if you're hungry in the middle of the night, I usually find myself at the Whiz Off of his house.
Well, I'm a big fan of that. And Tinkle Piss Piss, Prichard Thompson 2020, pronouns pal, no yob. Pick up all these shirts at bruceprichard.com. And I gotta tell you
a story. Got to interrupt. Sorry, no yob. Moskris was at WrestleCade this past weekend. Didn't like it.
What do you mean he didn't like it?
Didn't like it. Didn't understand it. Didn't like it. At first, he thought it was his T-shirt, and then he realized and he looked and no yob. No comprende, no yob. And people were trying to get him to take a picture with it. And apparently he didn't really have a sense of humor about it.
Are there pictures of people wearing the no yob shirt with Mil Moskris?
If there's anybody out there that got your picture taken with Moskris in the no yob shirt, I would greatly appreciate it if you would post it on Twitter or on Facebook or on our Instagram.
We'll give you a free shirt, boys and girls. We need this picture.
Oh my God, I would love it. And one of the guys came over to me and says, he goes, yeah, I went over to Moskowitz and he looked at me kind of strange and I wanted to get a picture with him and he wouldn't do it. And I thought, oh, well, but I thought that was a little kabuki-ish, and you can get a kabuki-ish shirt over at brucepritchard.com. Can you believe I interrupted a sell, folks? I actually did, just to tell that story.
Well, listen, we do no yobs here on the show, and we don't want you to do any yobs when it comes to the holiday gift giving season. Here's what I'm talking about specifically. If you have a wrestling fan in your life, maybe one of your wrestling buddies, we all have them. This is our hobby, but we don't share it with everyone, but we've got a handful of folks we share it with. This is the ultimate prize and present this holiday season for them, because when you place your order, put their cell phone number in. And now, not only are they going to get a really cool shirt, they're going to get a call from everybody's favorite host. No, sorry, I don't call. Everybody's second favorite host, Bruce Prichard. I'm just saying, you're the second most recognizable athlete on the show.
That's how I will, baby.
Check it out, brucepritchard.com. You're going to love the selection. You're going to love the deals. And your friends are going to love their gift. brucepritchard.com. It's the ultimate Christmas present for a wrestling fan.
Friday, December 15th is the start of a 2-day charity event like no other in Laguna Beach, California. Join good friend of the show, Shuli Agar, JD Harmeyer, Ronnie Mund, along with friend of the show, James Mattern, John Toll, and Eli Braden as they raise money for a great cause, Play Well Africa. On Friday, there will be a meet and greet with all attendees and celebrities, followed by a comedy show featuring John Toll, Eli Braden, James Mattern, and Shuli Agar. Ever wanted to try stand-up but never had the chance? Well, that show Friday night is perfect because you will get that opportunity. After the show, there will be a pub crawl through town, ending at the beach to close out Friday night. But that's not all. Go to ShuliLive.com for tickets. On Saturday, all attendees will be given open access to an exclusive beach house with private steps to the water below. Spend the day barbecuing, strolling through town, or relaxing on the beach. And burgers, beer, snacks, water, and other refreshments will be provided. Go to ShuliLive.com for tickets. But that's not all. When nightfall approaches, the house will be reset for our house party. Join Ronnie, Shuli, and JD at this privately catered party that hosts a live classic rock cover band where you can get up and try your skills at live karaoke. And this party includes a full open bar. Now, all proceeds support Play Well Africa, a registered 501c3 nonprofit. Play Well Africa collects the world's unwanted used Lego and redistributes them to rural villages in Africa, sparking the imagination of generations to come. Now, tickets are available at ShuliLive.com. That's ShuliLive.com. There's only 100 tickets being sold, so get yours today. ShuliLive.com for the Play Well Africa charity event with friend of the show, Shuli, JD Harmeyer, Ronnie Mund, James Mattern, John Toll, and Eli Braden on December 15th and 16th in Laguna Beach, California. That's ShuliLive.com.
So after they do this whole slap with Rude, they're off to the races, and Jake and Rude are working a lot of the house shows together, and we're clearly building towards something. I think one of the more famous segments that these guys did was the skit where we see Jake come out and tear off the tights of Rick Rude, because Rick Rude actually has Jake's wife Cheryl's face airbrushed onto his tights. And it's one of the first times we saw something like this happen, especially with someone's woman. What did you think of the angle? Whose idea was it? How did that come together? I know we've covered some of this on the Rick Rude episode, but let's go over it again.
Absolutely loved it, because again, you look at things that people can relate to, and it was real. So it was somebody that was getting revenge for a wife and or a girlfriend. You know, to me, you left out the most important whole thing in this entire angle, and that was the first introduction really of Cheryl after the slap, which was on the Brother Love show, where it was about the closest that I ever came to getting Jake to break in character on air. And that's when I turned, because nobody believed that I would actually do the Sister Snake, and I about popped him on that, and he was able to not do it. Cheryl almost did, but that was one of my favorite. People ask me all the time what my favorite brother love was. That's one of them up at the top, because I always loved working with Jake. He was just so damn easy, and it was a lot of fun. But the whole angle with Jake going out and ripping the tights off of Rick Rude had never been done. And yes, folks, he was actually wearing a G-string. He was wearing a T-back. We talked about this last week. Rick Rude was wearing a T-back when Jake came out and pulled his panties off. He pulled his panties off.
And we did not see hashtag Rick Rude's dong, right?
No, you did not see Rick Rude's hashtag dong. And if you did see oh my God. Oh, I am punchy old man having old. Yes. Rick Rude's hashtag dong. I want that trending. I want that trending citywide. Rick Rude's hashtag dong. I want y'all twitting that and
put it on Face Snap.
Yeah. Put it on. That's on that Instabook. Oh, I want it everywhere. Y'all get that shit out there now. That's Rick Rude's hashtag ding dong. That's what we do here. We trend. We trending now.
I don't know what you do for this company,
but I trend. I don't know what the fuck you do for this company, but I trend around here, by God. Do. Just saying.
Oh my gosh. How would he order, Rick Rude's hashtag dong? I feel like he'd want it scattered, covered, and chunked.
Well, fuck. I don't need no onions on my hashtag. Damn it, you just get I want the Rick and the Rude and the ding dong hash, with the number sign on it. But I don't want no hash for my tag.
SummerSlam 1988, August 29th. Jake pins Hercules. Why is he not working?
Thank God somebody does.
Why is he not working Rick Rude here? Doesn't this feel like a natural opportunity to put these guys together?
I don't know. It was a booking committee.
Oh, goddamn, Tony.
No, I'll tell you why.
Because you want to save it for the house shows.
What's that?
Save it for the house shows.
Save for the house shows, yes. And the fact that it was going to be going nationwide and on pay-per-view, save it for the house shows, man. Let them get it all out of their system first.
And let me tell you, they do it everywhere. Portland, Winnipeg, Cincinnati, Buffalo, East Rutherford, Auburn Hills, Chicago, Landover, Toronto, New Haven, Miami, Battle Creek, and all through October. But I just ran through a September. Every single one of those, Rick Rude, and all through October, Rick Rude. And then we cruise on into Survivor Series 88. Again, we're in Richfield. We see Jake Duggan, Patera, Scott Casey, and Tito take on Andre, Mr. Perfect, Rude, Race, and Bravo. Who sticks out like a sore thumb there, Bruce?
Oh gosh. Scott Casey was the main eventer anywhere in the country during this time. I will tell you a little something about this particular Survivor Series at the end of the night. The Richfield Coliseum was a large cavernous building as well. And we were waiting for Vince was having a meeting with someone. Vince Pat, we were going to charter back home that night. So way up at the top, I look up there and there sitting alone up in the balcony was Jake was going on. And there was this pungent odor, odoriferous odor, baby. And with, ever so sweet. And Jake and I sat up there, smoked a couple of joints until I finally saw Vince emerge from his office and gotta go. But that's what I remember. That's about all I remember about Survivor Series 1988. But I'll remember more next year on the Thanksgiving Day tradition.
On that show, let me remind you here, Jake would pin Rick Rude and then Perfect would pin Jake. And he wins the match for himself and Dino Bravo in the process. Royal Rumble 89 goes down on January 15th from Houston. Jake's in the Rumble match, comes in number 7, doesn't eliminate anybody, and is thrown. And he starts working the house show loops with Andre for the rest of January. I should ask here, we've talked about how Andre didn't really like Jake. How did Jake handle that? Just business as usual, or was he trying to beg forgiveness and offering some wine to Andre, or did he try to fix it, or was he just like, oh, well, fuck it?
What the fuck are you going to do? He's a giant. Did I tell the Uncle Elmer story about Andre and Uncle Elmer?
Even if you did, do it again.
Well, okay, this is a perfect example of Andre. Uncle Elmer comes up to Bobby Heenan one day in the dressing room and says, "Oh, Bobby, why don't Andre like me?" And Bobby says, "Well, gosh, Elmer, what would ever make you think that Andre doesn't like you?" "Well, Bobby, he told me so." And Bobby says, "Well, Elmer, I'd stay the fuck away from him then." "Sure, thank you, Bobby." So what do you, if the giant doesn't like you, there's not a whole lot you can do. John Studd just left. John Studd walked out. Jake stuck it out and tried to get along.
On March 11th, they do a Saturday night's main event, and Andre interferes in a match between Rick Rude and Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. Jake comes down and throws the snake on Andre, who seems to have a heart attack and is rendered unconscious. How receptive to this was Andre? Is Andre legit scared of snakes?
Well, if he was, that snake would have been Boots. By the end, fuck you, snake. No, Andre was cool. Andre was cool with the snakes. If he wasn't cool with the snakes, trust me, we wouldn't have put the damn snake on him.
Let me ask you this. How does Vince ask Andre to have a heart attack?
God damn, pal. I wonder what would happen if you were truly fearful of one thing, and that one thing became a reality.
Ooh, heart hurt.
Yes, a heart attack, a giant heart attack.
But I think, going back, even at in those days, I don't know if we ever referred to it as a heart attack. Never referred to it on air as a heart attack. Best of my recollection. Now we may have, I'm sure somebody's going to go back and watch it. Go, "No, Bruce, you were wrong. Dave Meltzer says you referred to it as a heart attack." But I'm pretty sure that it was, Vince was, "Oh my God, we're there. He's clutching his chest. He's clutching his chest." But you never say the words heart attack.
Well, I hope they took him to a medical facility.
Exactly. Because you sure as hell aren't going to go to a hospital or something like that.
This takes us to WrestleMania 5. Of course, April 2nd is when this goes down in Atlantic City. Jake would wrestle Andre. Big John Studd is the referee. Of course, Jake wins by DQ. Andre and Studd wrestled at WrestleMania 1 4 years prior. They have a little bit of a feud, and now here we are with Studd returning to the WWF. How was he the referee in the match, and how tickled was Andre to see Studd back and in the ring with him?
Fuck him. That probably could have been the saving grace for Jake, because
somebody else hateable.
There was somebody else in the ring that Andre didn't care for. And hate may have been a strong word with Jake, but Jake wasn't Andre's favorite person. Andre did not like John Studd. Didn't like John Studd because John was a big guy and John liked to call himself a giant. Andre, there was only one giant. Their personalities just clashed dramatically. Add on to that, Studd was terrified of Andre, and Andre knew it. So it was more of, it wasn't a bully thing. It was just a fuck you thing.
On April 4th in Glens Falls on Superstars, we would see Jake beat Virgil. And then after the match, DiBiase would attack Jake and in the storyline injure his neck. Of course, in reality, Jake was having lots of problems with those herniated and I guess crushed discs, and he needs to take some time off for surgery. So Jake would defeat DiBiase in house shows through early May, and then he's out for about 4.5 months. He comes back on September 20th in Louisville and gets a win over Barry Horowitz. I assume this break is sort of what we alluded to earlier when Jake rededicated himself to hitting the weights.
Well, yeah, and Jake just really needed time to heal up. He had been going constantly. He never really took time off to heal, and he needed to get his neck fixed or his back fixed, wherever the hell it was. I always thought it was his neck. He needed to get it fixed. So this was the time they picked a time to do it, and lo and behold, knocked it out.
Coming up next is something sort of fun. Survivor Series 1989. It's November 23rd, Rosemont Horizon. I should mention on the way here, Jake had been working with DiBiase and getting pins in every match or a DQ in all of the house shows for both October and November as we build to Survivor Series 89 here. And on one side, we've got DiBiase, Zeus, and the Powers of Pain. On the other, we've got Jake teaming with Hulk Hogan and Demolition. Jake didn't eliminate anyone, and he wound up being eliminated by DiBiase. Of course, Hulk goes on to be the sole survivor and winner of the match. Is there a phrase as to what we could attribute Hogan being the sole survivor?
Hogan must pose, pal. God damn it. Stop asking me stupid questions.
There's, according to Jake, this is one of those moments where he felt like Hogan was maybe trying to steal some of his thunder, because there was supposed to be a snake guy who had a snake that was so big that everybody on the team was going to carry it out. And he feels like this is sort of taking some of his heat, and he felt like Hogan was maybe threatened by the pops he was getting and wanted to sort of include himself on the snakery. Address the allegation from Mr. Roberts.
Well, best of my recollection, it was Vince's idea to have this gigantic snake. And when I say a gigantic snake, the thing had to be probably, 20 feet long. When they delivered it in a crate. A huge, like about it was maybe 4 feet high and like 4x4x4, giant, just this giant crate. And they brought it in a forklift and brought it down and uncrated it. And it was in this humongous bag, and they take the damn thing out. But the problem was the guys couldn't, you had all these huge monsters, and including, Hogan and Demolition, and they couldn't carry the damn snake. It was too big. And when I say it was too big, Hogan couldn't get his arms around it. Jake couldn't get his arms around it. And when they went to pick it up and the damn thing started to move, and there's like, well, who's going to control its head? Because when they picked it up, the handler had the head. And you're thinking, well, shit, if this thing just wants to turn around and bite Jake or anybody else and they let it go, who's going to get it? The whole idea was they're going to take this snake in and throw it into the ring. The heels are all going to powder, and then, somebody will come down. But there was no way one person couldn't handle the snake. When 4 people couldn't handle it, it was plan aborted. Weren't going to do that, but that was Vince's idea. That was a way for Vince to get the snake involved. I don't know how that's Hulk stealing his thunder.
Jake would continue to beat DiBiase on house shows for the rest of most of January. Let's get to Royal Rumble 1991. Jake's again in the Rumble match. He comes in 4th, doesn't eliminate anybody, and is eliminated by Randy Savage. Of course, Hulk Hogan gets the win here because
he must pose. God damn it.
And this, of course, sets up Hulk Warrior for WrestleMania 6, which you can enjoy in our archives. We should mention here that DiBiase starts to get the win late in January and through February. And then we all of a sudden start to see the Big Boss Man working with Jake. And that's going to lead us somewhere. On the February 23rd edition of the main event, we see DiBiase defeat Jake Roberts, and Jake winds up stealing the $1 million belt to set up the WrestleMania 6 match. We talked a lot about this on our $1 Million Man episode, but we haven't really touched on Jake's relationship with DiBiase, because once upon a time, he and these two guys in Duggan were running pretty hard for Bill Watts together, right?
Absolutely. They were the top stars for Bill Watts back in the day. And all 3 of those guys were good friends that ran together. They headlined cards all over the world. And plus they ran hard out of the ring as well.
Ran hard out of the ring is something that we should probably touch on, because of course we know that once upon a time, Hacksaw had some situations with marijuana and the law. Ted DiBiase's been pretty open about his struggles with infidelity in his marriage. And Jake the Snake Roberts, man, he was up for a good time. Is there anything to these guys? I mean, this sort of trio of guys running so hard, and then they all sort of have their own vices.
Yeah, they did. And it was, I think that Jake would readily tell you that he probably hit the harder drugs a lot more. Duggan was, I think still is, a pretty mellow guy. And Teddy liked to go out and drink and carouse in the bars. So, they all had their, as you say, different vices, but it was a kinship from coming up, and anybody that could survive the road with Bill Watts in the Mid-South back in the day, there was a bit of camaraderie there.
I find it kind of interesting that these guys have history together, and then they're going to work this program together, and it's over the $1 million belt, because a lot of times people would say about a performer like a DiBiase or a Jake Roberts, oh, you don't need a belt to get over. Some guys don't need a belt to get over. And here they are, not really working for a belt, but kinda, because it's the $1 million belt. And I think everybody agrees they're two of the most talented performers there.
I do agree. And it wasn't about the $1 million belt was a gimmick. The $1 million belt was a prop, and that was a part of the $1 million man's gimmick. So that wasn't something that was legitimately defended at any time.
Of course. I guess I'm just making a point that neither one of those guys go on to have some big singles title run, but both of those guys are regarded as being top class. They're headliners, they're main eventers, and their only sort of belt that they're battling for is a gimmick.
Yeah, they're battling over the $1 million, the whole $1 million gimmick, and being able to hurt the $1 million man where it hurts most, and that is in the pocketbook when you take money away from the $1 million man, and that was the whole angle.
I understand. I guess what I'm getting to is, do you guys have some sort of conversation with the performers at the time? I mean, a Ted DiBiase, I think a lot of guys would look at and say, one of the best performers to never be world champion. Does Vince
but he still needs a story.
Does Vince give I'm not arguing that. I'm saying, does Vince give the speech, not everybody needs a belt to get over, pal, to a Jake?
I don't think he needs to. No.
Okay. Around this time, of course, Jake has the belt, and DiBiase has a match with him. So the big boss man attacks Jake, handcuffs him to the ropes, and steals Damien because the belt was actually inside the bag with him. After the beatdown, they walk to, of all places, the set of the Brother Love show where you're ready and waiting. And after DiBiase talks to Slick about how good he paid them both, boss man, we can see on his face, apparently knew nothing about it. So then DiBiase demands the boss man reach his hand into the bag and get the belt. And after DiBiase accuses boss man of being scared to put his hand in the bag, boss man gives him a piece of his mind and then takes the belt out of the bag, shows it to DiBiase, and told him he's going to have to get it the old fashioned way. He's going to have to earn it. So he puts the belt back into the bag, goes to the ring, and gives Jake a key to uncuff himself. And now the big boss man is a babyface. You were a central part of this. Talk us through this angle.
Well, first of all, if Jake were smart, he would have been like Jim Cornette, and he would have had a spare handcuff key in his tights. Just saying. I thought this was an ingenious angle. It did the best for everybody involved in it. And for Boss Man to turn babyface, it was an old fashioned, your manager stealing money from you. And you go back to the 60s. I remember Gary Hart doing it a million times in Texas. And it was easy to understand that this big, lovable, dumb Cobb County, Georgia cop is being taken advantage of by the slickster. I mean, his name's a slickster, so he can't be honest. It just was a beautiful way to get everybody involved, and I thought it was one of the best angles and best stories of all these guys that people still remember to this day.
Jake and DiBiase are working together on the house shows through the rest of March, leading us into WrestleMania. We talked about them working together earlier. Did DiBiase enjoy working with Jake here?
Yeah, because it's a night off. It's a night off for both of them. I think that DiBiase and Jake could have the best match on the card every night with their eyes closed.
Of course, DiBiase would get the win that night by countout, and of course, he regains possession of the title. It's a little bit of a step down from a few years prior when DiBiase is working on top at WrestleMania 4, but still a very featured match. But I think what most people remember about this match is the promo prior to the match. And if you haven't watched this before, it's been a long time. I'm going to encourage you to throw it in your Google machine or just go to the WWE Network and check it out. He does maybe, I mean, do you think this is the best Jake the Snake promo of all time? I think it is.
I think it's definitely one of them. It's something that you can go back to and point to. And if you want to see the true genius of psychology of telling a story for an angle in a match, then go back and study this. And this was before writers. This was before, long scripts telling guys what to say, how to say it, where to look, what camera to work. This was Jake telling a story, a very simple story that made you believe. And there wasn't anybody at home or in that building that didn't believe Jake. And the beauty of Jake's promos were he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to yell and scream.
Right.
He would actually lower his voice, so you had to lean in a little bit to hear him better. And when you came in, that's when he really delivered his message the best. It wasn't over the top. It was cerebral. And he made you believe. He wasn't the biggest guy. He didn't have the best body, but he was the smartest guy in the room, and he didn't have to tell you.
Were you there when that promo was being produced?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was. But that's all Jake, 100%.
So, what time of day was it done? It wasn't done live.
Probably, WrestleMania 6.
Toronto, Skydome.
Yeah, we did those. We did those day of. So that probably would have been, I did the meeting the night before. That would have been probably late morning, early afternoon.
Is Vince in there when that's being shot as well?
I believe he was.
What's the reaction when you see a money promo like this happen? Do you remember yours or Vince's or anybody else's reaction to that? Because it is one of the most iconic promos of all time.
Well, the reason that you remember it now and say it's one of the most iconic of all time is because of what you have now. And in comparison, there is no comparison. In the day, Jake was delivering stuff like that night in and night out. And there were a lot of guys delivering great promos every night that you never even heard unless you were in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So it was what was expected and it was what was delivered. And when Jake was on, he was on, and there was nobody better.
So just business as usual. Nobody's high-fiving and saying, God damn, that's a promo, son.
Yeah, it was a great promo, and it was what was expected, and it was like, damn, good shit.
One of the things I think that made Jake resonate with so many fans, I know it did for me, is that you could sort of buy into the fact that some of what you're seeing was a presentation. I mean, the Ultimate Warrior probably didn't tie tassels around his arm and paint his face and then run through the supermarket like he was on supermarket sweep. But Jake the Snake Roberts probably talked and walked like that in real life.
Yes.
And it added a layer of believability that I don't even know I recognized as a kid. And that, okay, this guy is putting on a performance, but Jake, well, this is real. And I've met Jake in real life. And when Jake really wants to turn it on and look you in the eye and do a promo, it feels real. It doesn't feel like he's putting on a show.
It feels scary because you're not really sure if he's all there or not.
It's very, Manson, Koresh, sort of like, is he fucking with me? I think he's fucking with me. I'm not sure. And that is what made it work so well. And the way he would stare at the camera, and he didn't look like, this superhero. He looked like a guy who, if he put on a black leather jacket, is down the street and not someone to be messed with.
Yeah, but he's the crazy guy down the street that nobody fucked with.
I just said that. So, after this, he starts a feud with Bad News Brown. Did you know that Butch Reed was over in Florida?
You damn right he was.
So Jake starts a feud with Bad News Brown, and they wrestle on house shows through May, June, July, and August. Jake's winning all the matches, and we're building towards SummerSlam 90. It's August 27th in Philadelphia. Big Boss Man is the ref, and Jake goes on to win the match by DQ. These guys were put together, had a good little feud, but it didn't last very long. Jake says he had no problem working with Bad News, and they got along pretty well. But I found it interesting as a kid that it wasn't enough to just have these guys feud. Since Jake has an animal, got to give something to Bad News, right?
Well, everybody knows that snakes eat rats. But did you know that in Harlem, they have giant sewer rats that eat snakes? So, we got the biggest, baddest sewer rats we could find. And by God, that's what, you combat a snake with. You combine. What is worse, man, to be eaten by something or to eat something that could eat? I don't know, but it was big sewer rats, and they were the nastiest, stinkiest, most foul-mouthed fucking possums you ever saw. Ever hated them.
Whose idea is it to use fucking possums?
At first, man, they brought in a shitload of rats. Okay. And then when
all the boys
was
were
bad, what?
Oh God.
We said, no, this ain't going to work. We need possums. Vince, in describing the rats, basically said, I want it, like a big, huge possum. And then it was like, ding, ding, ding. Just get possums. Because they're of the rat family. Their fellatios are good or bad, one of the two, depending upon where you are in the country.
What area of the country had the best rat fellatio?
Oh, it would definitely have to be the South. Yeah. Texas. Yeah, I'm partial to Texas.
Well, if you liked it, you should have put a ring on it.
We brought in possums. We got working possums, though. Over at the old Possums R Us. We got to
get all our shit in, boys and girls.
Have I not I've gotten everything in this show without even trying.
The idea of working possums with a rat, you could just switch a few letters around and this is a whole different show.
I don't understand what you're trying to say here.
You should, if you haven't already, go through it in your Google machine. Bad News Brown promo on Jake Roberts. And the one that pulls up for me is from June 16th, 1990. You've got to see these big rat possums. This is something else. A guy like Bad News, is he receptive to working with possums?
Yeah, he didn't have a problem working with the old possums. They were a lot easier to work with than the rats.
Was Bad News not a fan of the rats?
No, he wasn't.
I bet Jake was all for the rats though, right?
Well, yeah, because they fed a snake.
Did Rick Rude ever get into the rats?
Full.
He what?
He kept his snake full.
Yeah.
Saying.
Okie doke.
See, every once in a while, you would have to send the snake back to the snake man so the snake could eat. And depending upon the snake, sometimes the snake would eat rats. Sometimes it would eat bunnies. Just depend on what the snake and what kind of appetite it had.
Who got the possums? Is this a Richie Posner deal, or are you guys sending Louie out for real guitars and shoot working possums?
No, the possums were done by Albert the Snake Man. He's half, you know, he runs both Snakes R Us and Possums R Us. Multi-talented guy, man.
It's like Bed Bath and Beyond. It's Snakes, Possums, and Beyond.
Yeah. Whenever a hurricane or something would hit Florida,
he'd be really excited, wouldn't he?
Oh god damn, man. You'd try and find Albert. I was like, where the hell's Albert? And I was, they had that big flood down in Florida, man. Some bitch down there hunting gators and shit.
In September, Jake starts working with Akeem in salad steel cage matches. They're working together on these on the 13th, 14th, 15th, 17th, 21st, and 24th. Of course, a year prior, he was working One Man Gang here with Akeem. What was it that you guys liked about these two guys and their chemistry or dynamic or the way they work together?
Two big, believable bastards that you could kind of get behind, and you knew they beat the shit out of each other. And you said it, man, they had chemistry. So they were always good matches.
One of my favorite things I saw when I was looking this up is on September 30th and August 1st, we would see Jake beat Akeem in Harlem street fights in New Haven, Connecticut and Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Well, you know, a Harlem street fight is much, much different than a Brooklyn street fight.
How so?
It's in Harlem.
On the October 6th edition of the Brother Love Show, Jake was your guest, and Rick Martel comes out and starts to spray the snake bag. So, of course, Jake goes after him to stop, and then Martel falls back and sprays Roberts in the eyes with arrogance. Pretty innovative idea at the time. You guys did vignettes with Jake at the eye doctor. He's got something going on with his eye to make it look like his pupil's gone. And Jake says this was his idea for an angle, and he would wear the contact in his eye, so it made it look like he had really been legitimately injured. But he also says he really couldn't see anything when he wore it. We've talked a little bit about Rick Martel.
Well, of course he was blinded with the arrogance. Are you not paying attention?
We've talked a little bit about this feud on our WrestleMania 7 episode, and we're going to get there in a moment. But Rick the Model Martel had been with the company for a while, obviously a former AWA world champion, one hell of a performer. But what I remember him most for is not a singles run in the AWA, and it's not Strike Force. It's for the model. And in hindsight, I could see maybe that was a stupid fucking gimmick, but when I was a kid, that was awesome. Tell us about this whole blinding angle with Jake and the model.
Why was it a stupid gimmick? I thought it was a great gimmick. It actually, you remember it. And it was something that fit Martel and was able to get personality out of him that we weren't able to get prior to this. The model was Vince's idea. And like I said, it was just an attempt to get more personality out of Rick Martel. Hit the nail on the head. The idea for the whole angle, best of my recollection, was 100% Jake, and he had it laid out all the way down to the contacts, because that was during a time that they had colored contacts, and I think he had seen it in some movie somewhere, and he's like, "What if I came back and I've got like a fucked up cloudy eye?" And 100% Jake's, but it was something people still talk about today, and got both guys over tremendously because it was just absolutely expertly done. And that great, just unbelievable DDT that I took on the set of Brother Love off the Chiz Arts.
Is that the first time you took the DDT? Like what we saw on camera, or did you do it earlier in the day to make sure you could do it?
Nope. Did it one time, man. He showed me how to do it in the back, and said, "Just relax, go with me, and pancake out." I said, "Got it," and that was it. Because it wasn't like it wasn't like doing it in the ring. In the ring, it's even easier, man. I'm doing it on that unforgiving stage, which was solid as a rock.
This episode on Jake the Snake Roberts will likely be heard by 600,000 wrestling fans. That's right, 600,000 wrestling fans. And you can advertise to those fans. Just contact me, Matt Kuhn, at matt@mattcoon.com or hit me up on Twitter @mattcoonmusic for details. You can advertise right away and tell everybody how great your product is. Reach me at matt@mattcoon.com. It's more affordable than you think. Look forward to hearing from you.
In November, Martel and Jake are working together. Let's get to Survivor Series 90. It's November 22nd in Hartford. Jake is the captain of the Vipers, which is himself, Jimmy Snuka, and the Rockers. They're taking on the Visionaries, which is Rick Martel, Power and Glory, and the Warlord. Everyone on Jake's team was eliminated except for himself. And then Jake ends up getting counted out when he chases Martel to the back. So the entire team of the Visionaries were the survivors. And it's the first time in Survivor history, I think, that an entire team made it through. And of course, we talked a lot about this match on our Survivor Series 1990 episode, which is also available in the archives. But you guys were clearly having some fun with the Visionaries name here, right?
Well, of course, because you had the model Rick Martel who was able to take the vision from Jake the Snake. So yeah, definitely it made sense. And it was a good angle, and why not? You have Paul Roma.
Let's touch on Jimmy Snuka here, because Snuka had been one of the most over characters in the company just a handful of years prior to this. But then he sort of has a little bit of stop and start run with the company. What was going on with Snuka during this time?
Lovely, brother. Jimmy just was, Jimmy had a great run, but when Jimmy left in 85, 86, I believe, when Jimmy left, and when he came back after that, he just wasn't the same person. And his mobility was down quite a bit. He had put on quite a bit of weight, but Vince always had a soft spot for Jimmy Snuka. And, there's somebody that should be on the poll sometime is Jimmy Snuka, because it's an amazing story. It's a guy that couldn't read or write at all and made it around the world, was a top star. I mean, just an incredible story. And a really sad story to boot, and obviously all the controversy right before his death and the accusations that surrounded him. But it's just a fascinating story, everything that he dealt with throughout his life, man. And I remember sitting at a table in El Paso, Texas, at the Hilton in El Paso, Texas. Why I remember that? I know why. We're sitting there. They kept the restaurant open late for us, and it was Jimmy's first night in. And they came around, and they had a steakhouse at the Hilton where you ordered the steak by the ounce. Well, Jimmy didn't understand what that was. He didn't understand what that meant, nor could he read a menu. So he just kind of sat. He was in between me and Vince. So on one side, he's looking at me going, "Oh, what looks good, brother? What are you going to have, brother?" And I said, "I'm going to get like a 12-ounce filet." "Yeah, that sounds good, brother. I'm going to have the same thing." And then Vince is like, "God damn, Jimmy, get a 16-ouncer. Get some meat on there." And basically Vince ordered for him because Vince knew. And I knew because my brother Tom, in 1977, maybe, Snuka was down here, and we had basically, Ned the First Reader reading books trying to teach Jimmy how to read and write in 1977. But all he wanted to do was work out. He never really wanted to learn any of that shit. So that was kind of the deal with Jimmy. He just wasn't the same performer. And in Vince's eyes, he wanted the Superfly, and we just didn't have it.
We had Snuka on the poll last year, and he lost. We'll have him back, I'm sure. But he does leave in 85 and spends the next few years with the AWA before coming back in 89 at WrestleMania 5, I believe. When he comes back at WrestleMania 5, was there any sort of discussion about whether or not to bring him back after the death of Nancy?
That wasn't even a discussion. I guess that was something that had happened a long time ago, and that was basically done at that point. That was something that was brought up, just re-brought up just recently. But
he killed her in 83 and then
allegedly killed her.
Okay. Well, he lost a civil judgment for $500,000 in 85.
Okay. But again, I don't know. And I hate to say that when you don't know, and he lost a civil judgment, but
okay. He lost a civil judgment for murdering a woman in 85. And, not too long after that, or around that same time, is when he winds up leaving the company. Did you ever have a conversation with Vince about Vince feeling like he needed to distance himself once the civil judgment was won?
Nope.
Have you ever heard the story that's sort of a famous story of Vince carrying a briefcase in and saying something like, "You think you're going to hurt my business by saying that one of my wrestlers is a savage? I deal in the garbage business." Have you heard?
I heard the story. I heard that recollection. Yeah.
Did you ever ask Vince about that?
Nope.
When you hear the story, do you hear it just in dirt sheets online, or are boys whispering that?
No, I heard it in dirt sheets online when all this stuff came to surface last year or 2 years ago.
Okay, let's get back on track. Martel is working with Jake all through November and December. I mean, all over the place. And then on into January, they're still working together. And one of my favorite matches is January 8th. Jake got a win over Izzy Slapowitz. What's your favorite Izzy Slapowitz match?
Izzy wasn't nearly as good as Fuzzy. I thought Fuzzy was the more talented of the two. And he had one of the best runs with Iron Mike Sharp that you'd ever want to see.
Let's get to the 91 Royal Rumble. It's January 19th. It's in Miami. Jake's in the Rumble match. He enters at number 9, doesn't eliminate anybody, and is thrown out by Martel. Hogan winds up winning the match. Of course, this is the Rumble where Slaughter beat Warrior for the world title. What do you remember about the 91 Royal Rumble? We've mentioned that Jake was in a lot of these. Any sort of Jake Royal Rumble memories you want to mention?
To me, the best one was in 92 with Jake, where he just kind of slid into the corner and watched guys fight, which to me was the all-time best Royal Rumble spot ever. But these were Rumbles where we just everybody got in, and that was the match. The 91 Royal Rumble, man, that was all about Desert Storm and the war breaking out. And do we burn the flag? Do we not burn the flag? So
January 29th, you guys are in Savannah and you work a blindfold match with Jake working with Martel. And I think this is the first blindfold match in WWF history, probably done as a trial run here to see how it works before you put it on for WrestleMania. Were you there for this match in Savannah? What'd you think about it? Whose idea was the blindfold match? Give us something on that.
I want to say it was Jake's idea to do the blindfold match and taking it all the way to WrestleMania. And I don't know that Vince was completely sold on it. For those of us that had seen blindfold matches before, we knew what it could be. And it was what it was. It was a gimmick match, but it was something that got a lot of crowd participation and the audience got involved in it. And it was something that it's a novelty, and put it on WrestleMania. And I think that people could dig it.
No doubt they dug it. Let's talk about the February 1st, 1991 edition of The Observer. Dave wrote, because of the publicity surrounding the Duggan-Shiek incident, the WWF began testing its wrestlers sporadically for cocaine. One wrestler who failed tests on more than one occasion was Jake Roberts. Roberts was an even bigger star then than now, and the WWF suspended him for 30 days, as they did a half dozen other wrestlers. I already knew this when I called Terry Garvin of the World Wrestling Federation, who at the time I spoke with on an almost daily basis as the designation of Vince McMahon himself. Garvin at first denied it, but then called me back a few minutes later and confirmed it. At that point, it really didn't matter because I had already received confirmation of it many other places. In fact, Roberts and the rest were already missing shows. The story was already placed in the typed edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter that was being printed, but couldn't be mailed until the next day. After he confirmed the story, Garvin asked if I could keep it out of the Observer. I later spoke with someone else in the company about the situation, and the company asked for a favor. Basically, I was told that if the Roberts story makes the Observer, with all the media types who read the Observer, Eventually, it might make the general news media. Do you remember there being a routine line of communication with Dave Meltzer during this era?
I remember Vince always had someone that, yes, for him to call in and confirm or deny. So yeah, I guess it was Garvin at that time. For a time, it was Jim Ross. It was J.J. Dillon. It was myself for a while. So did Meltzer run it or not run it?
He ran it.
Okay.
Obviously the Duggan-Shiek incident affected the company. I guess we should remind everybody in 87, Duggan and Sheik were pulled over by the New Jersey police before a WWF event on suspicion of DUI. And then they discovered that Duggan was under the influence of marijuana and alcohol while Sheik was high on cocaine. They also found some cocaine in the vehicle. Duggan winds up getting a release and Sheik is put on probation for a year. Eventually they're both released from the WWF, but Duggan eventually returns fairly quickly. How big of a deal was it when when Duggan and Sheik wound up being arrested and making the papers here at a time when kayfabe was very much alive and the company is on fire? They don't want any sort of association with the drug culture or one of their guys being arrested. And they certainly don't want anyone to know that a bad guy was riding in a car with a good guy.
Huge. It was bad on every level. It was here. You had Duggan, who had just made his debut, a huge baby face, and programmed with the Sheik. And here they are riding together. That's bad. Number one, at a time that while kayfabe wasn't what it had been in the past, it was still practice, and you still didn't want to see guys arriving at the building or riding in cars together. Add on that, on top of that, drugs. And it was compounded 10 times. So it sucked. I mean, it really sucked. And you're caught with what the hell do you do? And really, well, not what the hell do you do? I remember Vince's immediate reaction was like, he had to let him go on all counts, because to him, it was, you kind of disrespected the business. You guys riding together, not good. And then to be caught with drugs riding together in New Jersey, doubly not good, right in our backyard. So it was a double-edged sword, and it was a big damn deal.
So this Jake failure, do you recall there being?
Yeah. Oh,
talk to us about this.
Two people I remember failing the test. Vince made a big speech, had a meeting, and told everybody that there was going to be testing. And man, you talk about some nervous people. It was like ruh-roh, but we weren't sure what was going to be what. I mean, are they really going to test us for pot? Because in the meeting, cocaine was the main thing that was discussed. So I think a lot of people viewed this as a cocaine test. The two guys that failed were Jake and Chavo Guerrero Sr. And Chavo had just started as well. And Chavo had come in as a commentator for the Spanish side. So it was unfortunate on all levels. It was unfortunate for us because I remember, I just started with running Houston, and we had Jake on the card, and we had Chavo on the card. And Paul Bosch was just devastated because both guys had been big stars in Houston and was afraid of the publicity. And Vince had made that decision, okay, well, as far as, flunking the test, we've got to help these guys. The first thing is going to be suspension. I want guys to go and get help, and so on and so forth. So I think the first time was like a 6-week suspension. The second one was like a 90-day. I don't remember the exact terms. And the third offense was you were let go. But yeah, Jake was one of the first ones at the first test.
What a time to be alive. Duggan says that arrest is something that Vince never forgot and changed his career forever because he felt like he was being groomed to be a world champion, and he's happy to have survived it because it would have killed a lot of careers, but he doesn't feel like he achieved the success he could have had he not been arrested. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I think that it was just a black mark on him. And Jim is an extremely intelligent guy. I just think that kind of put a damper because Vince really had high hopes for Duggan at that time.
Jim says that Vince called him and said in a very bitter, disappointed tone, "Jim, how could you do this to us?" And Duggan is trying to defend this as much as he can and says, "We're not even friends." And he says, quote, "The worst part about it is that people think that Sheik and I are friends. That's the one time I rode with the guy, but I should have known better. It was a huge blow to my career. And if that didn't happen, my entire career would have gone a different direction." And he says after he was fired, Jake called and tried to calm him down and reassure him that Vince would eventually rehire him. And I find it kind of ironic that the voice of reason here is Jake Roberts, and that maybe some of that isn't even lost on Duggan. Duggan says, "Jake and I were close, but he was the one who tried to smooth it over with Vince. Then Vince spoke in front of all the boys, pounded the podium, and said Duggan and the Sheik will never ever work for the WWF again. And that's when Jake called me and said, 'You're screwed, brother.' I was living in Louisiana and I went off the deep end for 2 weeks and partied hard. And then I realized I had to go back to work. That's when I made the meeting with Dusty in Atlanta. But before I went down there, Bruce Prichard from the WWF office called and said, 'Just lay low. We'll bring you back.' They did bring me back, but never with the same push. I'm still proud of my career. I beat all the guys except for the ones who went on to face Hogan. And people ask all the time, 'Aren't you upset that you were never world champion?' Listen, we're not all lead singers. I was the drummer in the band, and that was a good spot to be." Do you remember this phone call to Duggan where you gave him the advice to just lay low?
I do. Because Jim and I had been friends, before that, in the Mid-South, and we always got along. And I knew even then that Vince was pissed. Make no mistake about it. He was livid. He was pretty pissed, and he wanted heads to roll. And Jim was wrong place, wrong time with the wrong guy. So Vince had to put on a strong front, but I knew that Vince would forgive him. And I knew that at some point, once it blew over and people started or stopped talking about it, that with Jim, I just thought that Vince would bring him back. There was a soft spot there with Vince and Jim. And I didn't want Duggan to do something that might jeopardize him coming back. And by that meaning going to work in Atlanta. And I think his analogy of being, the drummer in the band is a great analogy.
What sort of reaffirming do you give to Jake when he's suspended? Is anybody communicating with Jake when his cocaine suspension happens?
I think it was more than anything is don't go off the deep end and, get your shit straight. There was a lot, the crazy thing about it was instead of people taking it seriously and saying, okay, let's clean up our act here a little bit. And I'm speaking in regards to a lot of the talent. There was more of, okay, get the pen out and how long does cocaine stay in your system? How long does marijuana stay in your system? How long does this stay in your system? And guys figuring that, okay, if I go home and I'm not on the road for 3 days, can I get high and then I'll come back and I'll be okay for the test? Instead of just quit, stop. And that was a little bit of the mentality at first. I don't think that people, and Jake, man, unfortunately, you know, he flunked, and Vince had to set an example. And that was, people didn't think that Vince would let a top guy be off for 6 weeks. And he did.
When Jake is off for 6 weeks here on a drug suspension, what sort of income is he receiving?
None. Nothing.
How is that received by an old timer like Jake? Is Jake asking for his release and saying, let me go, I'll go somewhere else and work if you won't work me?
No, he's under contract, and part of his contract, you know, that was a part of their contract, that they had to adhere to the rules and regulations. And that was a rule and regulation. So, and plus that time, if he were to get his release, you know, who wants to have a guy that flunked a drug test on their roster? So it was a tough time, but yeah, they didn't get paid when they were on suspension.
Jake is working with, Martel everywhere. I mean, everywhere. February 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 20th, 21st, 23rd, 24th, 27th, all through February, every single time he's working with Martel until they go to Portland. And on the 27th, he's working in a cage against Earthquake. And then he starts to have some matches here or there with Earthquake. And then they work a series of tag matches, teaming with Boss Man against Perfect and Martel. And now we're here at WrestleMania 7. We've had our practice match, and the blindfold match is here. We've talked about this a lot in our WrestleMania 7 episode. And Jake has a pretty textbook performance when you talk about having the crowd in the palm of your hand. I don't know that this match would have been nearly as good if Jake wasn't the guy sort of calling the shots. He knew how to get that crowd up and down better than anybody. Did he not?
Jake was absolutely a master of psychology. Jake had this match in his head when he suggested the whole angle and the whole storyline, because he knew exactly what he wanted to do, knew exactly how that match was going to go, and the spots that he was going to take the crowd through in that whole thing. You add on top of that, you've got 60,000 plus people in Toronto, great wrestling town, that were into every single thing that they did. And so when I hear people shit on this match, I just laugh and think, what the hell? I thought it was a beautiful match that told a great story. And it was a culmination of this long story that ended there. And I thought it was masterfully done. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Another match was started right after with Earthquake, starting a story with Jake. And as a kid, I love this. They started March 26th. And on Saturday night's main event on April 15th, you see Jake in a 20-man battle royal that Mr. Perfect wins. And then all through April 18th, 19th, 20th, 22nd, and 24th, Earthquake is beating Jake by DQ. And then on April 27th, that edition of Superstars, we see Jake and Earthquake have a match. And this time, Earthquake hits the snake bag, which supposedly contained Damien. And when I'm saying he hit it with two of the Earthquake splashes, which in kayfabe killed the snake. Of course, as a kid, I thought this was awesome. Well, I mean, it was horrible, but it sold me. I mean, I remember this so well as a kid. And Jake has said since that inside the bag was 60 pounds of hamburger meat inside women's pantyhose, and that this idea was his. What do you remember about Earthquake and kayfabe killing a snake?
Well, we had to weigh whether or not, it wasn't PETA at the time. It was whatever, the cruelty to animals thing. And we had to have someone, at the show to verify that there was not a snake that was being killed. There was also a disclaimer at the end of the show that says no animals were harmed in this taping and blah, blah, blah. I got to dispute the hamburger. It was not hamburger. It was ground chuck. And it was actually men's pantyhose, not women's pantyhose. You're not even selling any of this shit. But it was fun. It was something that we thought. And if you can actually believe this, we're having meetings about, will people really be upset about a snake getting crushed? But there were people that were upset about the damn snake getting crushed.
Well, they like the snake. They feel like they know the snake, and know they don't like snakes in real life, but they like this part of the show with the snake. And I'm sure you guys had to really sell Pat Patterson on letting go of those men's pantyhose, right?
Well, it was something. They had a couple holes in them, so it was time to renew.
Well, I mean, those were his favorite ones, all the way down from Rio, right?
Well, De Janeiro.
How does he say it, by the way?
Rio, fucking Rio de Janeiro. Out of faces.
A few weeks later, Earthquake's on Primetime Wrestling, and he gives Lord Alfred Hayes what he calls Quake Burgers, which he says is actually Damien. This feels like something Vince McMahon would have pitched. What would this have sounded like?
God damn, it'll be beautiful. And Alfred's eating the burger. He said, "Did I say Quake Burgers? It's a snake burger."
Yeah. I don't know what it is about feeding pets to people. But there seemed to be that kind of a fetish a little bit.
I could be wrong, but I feel like the group who was backstage for this to monitor it, make sure that they saw the snake before and after, was the RSPCA. Does that sound
something
right?
Like that. One of them PCAs.
RESPSCT.
You know.
I think that's the way the Warrior spelled it at SummerSlam. So, Jake introduces a new snake. This is Damien's big brother, Lucifer. And when Jake does an interview introducing the snake, he says what Earthquake did to Damien was, quote, no less than rape. Couldn't probably say that today, could you, Bruce?
Yeah, I wouldn't advise it. I don't think that'd be a good idea. Just no, I'm going to leave it at that. No commentary on that one.
We see Jake start working with Berserker overseas. You guys run a series of shows in Ireland and then England, and he's working Berserker, Warlord, and Mr. Perfect. How did Jake enjoy being in Europe? It feels like he would have either loved it or hated it. Nothing in between.
It is. Well, you know what? It's actually a love-hate relationship, because when you get there, the audiences are so appreciative to see you, especially in those days. They were just so damn happy because they don't have a steady diet of the product live over there. So you love that part of it. You love the fact that your hotel and everything is paid for, but the travel, is absolutely brutal. Just getting over there and then the bus trips in between towns. It's a grind, and I think everybody hated that part of it. So I don't know that anybody went, "Hey, all right, I'm going to go get an 8-hour trip to the UK." Not everybody loved it. No. And it seemed to make everybody crazy. Overseas trips always seem to make people crazy.
What, do you remember what day you got shit canned in 1991? Was it May?
Oh, I can look it up. I have my book here somewhere.
We don't need to be exact. I guess
it was in May.
What I'm asking about is, were you around when you guys ran the Omni in Atlanta? That was on May 3rd. It feels like an interesting choice to run the Omni in Atlanta.
Why? I mean, it was a big building in Atlanta.
Okay. Cool story. We're doing a podcast here. Try to keep up.
Well, no, I mean, it's another building. What the hell?
Let's talk about Jake's court case. Allegedly he was sued for hitting a guy in Florida. And I think you were the only guy who testified on Jake's behalf. What do you remember about this?
Man, it was, south. What's that? Fort Lauderdale, in Fort Lauderdale. We had been down there for a TV taping. We had all gone to a bar. Everybody had been partying pretty hard. And there was this one guy who, there's always one. And when you walk into a bar, especially, a group of wrestlers and things like that, you can always tell the one guy that's going to be the asshole and going to be the problem before the end of the night. And everybody was kind of blowing this guy off. He was just a jerk and, talking about, "Hey man, I can get you guys whatever you need. And let's blow this joint. The girls are better over here," and blah, 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 blah. Well, we left. At least I left. I believe I left with Marty Jannetty, and we went back to the hotel. But the next day, Jake comes into TV and says, "Hey, you guys remember that guy that was in the bar, the obnoxious one?" I said, "Yeah." Everybody's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, this guy, we went out, he started all this shit, and we ended up getting a fight on the side of the road. And, man, I ended up, having to knock the guy out and leaving." He goes, "It was just crazy, bizarre. The guy all of a sudden pulled the car over and we got into it." Next thing you know, fast forward, I think it was like 6 months later, the guy files charges on Jake. And he files criminal charges on him for assault, and then he filed civil charges on him. So it was me, Marty, Sean. I don't remember if Taker was there or not, but there were a few of us that were there, and I don't know that anybody was allowed to get involved because of working with the WWF at the time, or if I was the only one that said, "Yeah, I remember." So I had to go down to Fort Lauderdale, and I'll never forget the criminal trial when, they came in and everybody does their testimony, and we went back to the hotel, and I'm sitting in the bar at the Marriott, and Cheryl walks in with the lawyer. And I said, "How'd everything go? Where's Jake?" And she said, "They took him away." Like right there. They said guilty and took him away. And she goes, "I didn't even get what am I going to do? He's in jail." And I remember Jake was wearing like one of those Jake suits. It wasn't, like the kind of a light blue. I don't know what color it was, but it was not like a regular business suit. It was something you'd wear to go out clubbing. And they took him away, made him, give up all of his stuff, took his shoes, took everything, and put him in jail. And of course, I'm getting on a flight. I'm heading back to Connecticut, where I lived at the time. And it was bizarre because this guy had been such an asshole. Now, nobody knows what actually happened between Jake and the guy, other than Jake and the guy in that car that night, because there were no witnesses. And I wasn't able to sit in the courtroom and hear any of the other testimony at all. So I just knew what Cheryl told me. So Jake goes to jail. He's in jail for a little while. He gets out, and then they had the civil suit. I went back for the civil suit, and the guy ended up getting a little money out of Jake. But on the civil suit, and the only reason I'm telling this, it was funny, the civil suit, Jake went out and got a really nice suit at Macy's or something, and was dressed probably the nicest I've ever seen Jake dressed. And in that one, because the lawyer told him, says, "Yeah, you might want to change your look for this a little bit, so that people don't see Jake the Snake. They can see Aurelian Smith Jr."
I know you weren't there, but I feel like we should mention on June 17th, Jake worked and beat Louis Spicoli in Sacramento. Louis would have only been 20 at the time. When did you first meet Louis? When I was doing my research, it shocked the hell out of me that he worked a match with you guys in 91.
Yeah. Louis was one of those, Southern California guys that he was part of Bill Anderson's crew. Bill Anderson was the ring announcer in Los Angeles. He worked in the old Olympic. He's still in Los Angeles. Really, really good guy. And he had a wrestling school there with Jesse Hernandez. And Louis Spicoli was one of the students from Bill Anderson. So when we needed extras in the California area, we would go to Bill Anderson, and Bill would always supply guys for us. And Spicoli was one of them, a young kid that just wanted to be a wrestler.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened when you were gone. I know you weren't there for this, but we've got to talk about it. Jake starts helping the Ultimate Warrior prepare to wrestle the Undertaker. Series of really odd vignettes. The Warrior would be locked inside a coffin as he is buried alive in dirt before being abandoned there by Jake. And then the Warrior's walking through a room full of live snakes to reach a chest containing the answer. Of course, he opens the chest only to be bitten by a king cobra. As the Warrior is passing out from the bite from the rubber snake, Roberts is joined by the Undertaker and Paul Bearer, showing it was a plan between the two the entire time. And then Roberts says, never trust a snake. So of course, Jake's a full blown heel now, and they're supposed to feud after SummerSlam, but obviously those plans were nixed because Warrior was fired the night of SummerSlam. I know you were gone when all this happened, but what'd you think of these vignettes of him in the room with snakes and the way this was put together?
Loved the concept, hated the execution. I thought that the vignettes were during a time that the new executive producer, John Filippelli, was going to show Vince how television is produced, and they were doing a lot of cutaways and a lot of Hollywood, I guess, effects that didn't ring true. And that's probably just my pride. I would have shot him differently. I would have done it a whole lot different. The other thing that I remember was when Warrior was going through the room with all the snakes and they're falling down on top of him and he's kicking the shit out of those snakes and throwing them all over the room. I have no idea where the hell PETA was or whatever the hell that organization was that you said earlier when Warrior's kicking the shit out of these snakes and throwing them all over the room. But, I know I probably would have gotten to hell if I had done it, but I just loved the payoff, man. Can't trust a snake.
Did you like Jake better as a face or a heel?
Heel all the way.
I agree.
Twice on Sunday.
There's a story out there. Jake says when Warrior was champion that McMahon called him and told him that he had to ask Warrior if he could wrestle him for the belt. And Vince is saying that Jake needs Warrior's permission to wrestle him. Did you ever hear about that? That the situation with Warrior was so delicate that he had to okay all of his opponents?
That just doesn't sound real to me. I just don't see that happening.
Of course,
I could see him saying, "Hey, get with Warrior and talk about what you guys might be able to do." But I don't see him saying, "You got to call him and get his permission to work with him." I just don't see that happening.
SummerSlam 1991. Of course, Jake didn't have a match, but he appeared after the pay-per-view at Randy and Miss Elizabeth's wedding reception when a cobra snake comes out as a present. So I know you weren't there at the time, but since we can't work with Warrior since he's out of here, we're just going to pivot and ruin this happy day. If you had to freestyle a guess, whose idea was that?
Most likely Vince, and I could see Vince going to Randy at the last minute saying, "Goddamn, pal, I need you back." Because Randy, after the wedding, was going to take some time off. So I could see Vince going to him and pitching, and that's the way it was presented to me by Randy, that they can't, they need the old timer to come back and save the day. The young kids, they flake out. So, This was another thing that I thought was absolutely tremendous. I loved it. I didn't like the way it was shot, but I loved the angle.
After SummerSlam, a feud with Sid starts. Sid was supposed to wrestle El Diablo, and the Undertaker comes out and accepts the challenge to face Sid. Paul Bearer offers El Diablo a bribe to walk away. And when the match starts, El Diablo comes back and hits Sid with a briefcase. Of course, when El Diablo unmasks, it's Jake. Jake proceeds to unleash a King Cobra on Sid until Duggan comes out. So the heel turn is in full effect. These guys work together a lot. June 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, twice on the 6th, and then on the 7th, Sid beats Jake every time by DQ. And somewhere around here hurts his bicep, and the feud is completely dropped, and Jake and Savage were put back together. Do you reckon it was softball season?
Thank God for Sid Justice. Oh yeah. That's my favorite line of the whole thing too. I don't know why I went there. Yeah, I think it was softball season.
Of course, Savage is still technically unable to wrestle because he lost his retirement match to Warrior at WrestleMania 7. But during an episode of Superstars, Roberts got Savage into the ring and attacked him, tied Savage up into the ropes, and had the King Cobra bite his arm. The snake was devenomized, and Jake has said he had trouble getting the Cobra to release the bite. This I know you weren't here for, but we've got to talk about it. It's burned into the minds of the fans forever. It certainly is mine. And Jake says the day the angle was shot, Savage is really, really paranoid, of course. and he demands that the cobra bite him first in order to prove that the snake was devenomized. So Jake does it, and Savage makes sure that Jake doesn't leave. He wants to keep an eye on him to make sure he's not taking any sort of medication or doing anything to, handle whatever side effects there are going to be or die. And then of course in the ring, when they do it for the crowd, the snake is not letting go of Randy's arm. And, he eventually pries the mouth open, but by this point, Savage is bleeding. I know you weren't there for this, but I would love to see what you say that Savage told you about this. Cause I know in all your times you spent with them, you guys discussed this angle.
Okay. First of all, the Cobra thing was something that Jake and I had talked about a while ago. We actually had discussed it to do with, what's his name? Earthquake. There were guys that used to like to get the snake riled up before Jake would go to the ring. So
don't
Jake
say guys, name names.
No, no, because there were a lot of guys. There were a lot of different people that did it. And people would think it was funny, Jake having to deal with this damn snake. So Jake wanted to switch the snake and put a cobra in there and let it out because he knew that Albert had a cobra that had been defanged and devenomized. This gets the wheels turning that okay, people know that, the python, if it bites you, it's not venomous. So if it bites you, it's going to hurt. Yes. But it's not going to poison you. A cobra is one of the most poisonous snakes in the world. So when you see a cobra, you go to, oh God, I don't want to get bit by that because I'll die because of the venom. So it's like, oh my God, if we could get a working snake and teach the snake to strike and it bit somebody, that could be so cool because people would freak out. So that's how it started. And I pitched the idea originally to Vince, which Vince hated. God damn it, I can't have a cobra bite somebody. The fuck is going to believe that? God damn it, Bruce. Stop smoking that shit. So he shit all over it and hated it. And Jake obviously went back and pitched it for this deal. So it was a working cobra. And they had to, teach it by, kind of tapping its head, and it would strike. So they talked Savage into it, and this is all coming from Randy. Randy wasn't real happy about it, but once he was convinced that he wasn't going to die, he was all up for it because it was something that had never been done in the business before. And yeah, why not? Okay. I don't think anybody anticipated, that was the other thing about what people don't know, like with the pythons, when they bite you, their jaws move back and forth and it works like a saw, and they can cut, and they got little tiny teeth, and they still have teeth, and it hurts like hell. Well, the same thing with a cobra. Yes, they have the two big fangs, but they also have little teeth. So when they latch onto something, first of all, they hit them with their venom and it paralyzes them, but then they use their teeth to saw back and forth to bite into their prey and help it get down their throat. So since the cobra didn't have fangs, all it had was teeth, and it latched on to Savage's arm and it just started sawing away. Nobody thought that it would hold on the way that it did. So Jake didn't know how to exactly get it off. How do you get a snake off?
With your mouth or hand.
Well, you go get one of them rats that does that fellatio shit.
Well, you can have it delivered, right?
Well, yeah. Fellatios are us.
So, these guys are working together on all the house shows, and, I don't know why, but I found it funny that occasionally, like on November 4th in Salt Lake City, it wouldn't be Randy Savage who would beat Jake Roberts. It would be Mr. Madness. What do you remember about this mysterious Mr. Madness?
The Macho Man couldn't wrestle. He lost to retirement, so Mr. Madness had to make an appearance. He's a friend of mine.
The guys worked together through all of October and November. Let's get to Tuesday in Texas. What's kind of interesting is neither Jake nor Savage are on Survivor Series. They're saving the Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view to be Hogan's rematch for the world title with the Undertaker, but also too the return to pay-per-view by the Macho Man and the payoff of this big feud. Of course, in the match, we see Savage pin Jake, but Jake still gets the last laugh because he winds up slapping Elizabeth during the match. I know you weren't technically working for the company, but you were at the building that day. How did Randy feel about having Miss Elizabeth slapped?
Randy didn't like anybody touching Liz, so he wasn't crazy about it. However, if you're going to have anybody do it, Jake was so easy, just such a pro that I would think that he would trust Jake to do it.
These guys are working together through the Royal Rumble. Of course, we mentioned that Jake would come in at number 16. He doesn't eliminate anyone. He's thrown out by Savage. But the little nuance that Bruce referenced is still probably something as if you needed another reason to go watch Rumble 92. The guys are continuing to work together everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Like, let's look at February, for instance. The 1st, they do a double shot. On the 7th, they're working again. The 8th, the 9th, the 14th, 15th, 19th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 28th. Every single one of those is Jake and Savage, and they continue that all the way through March. We should mention that on March 28th, there is a 20-man battle royal in Landover, and Savage wins it with an elbow drop from the top. And he hit another one after the match, and Jake was helped to the back. So when he gets to the back, he grabs a steel chair and says he's going to hit whoever comes backstage first with it, whether it was Savage or Elizabeth. And just as Roberts is about to swing the chair, he's stopped by the Undertaker. And as Roberts is distracted, Savage hit him with the chair. This leads to a Roberts situation and the Undertaker's face turn. Roberts appeared on the funeral parlor and asked Undertaker why he stopped him from attacking Elizabeth. And then he DDT'd Paul Bearer and shut the Undertaker's hand in a coffin and hit him with a chair. Undertaker gets up after each shot and chases Roberts backstage with his hand still shut in the coffin. As a kid, the Undertaker dragging this coffin is something I'll never forget. I know you weren't there, but what'd you think of this angle?
Great visual. Absolutely great visual of Taker. He didn't sell the chair shots. He sold them just enough, but he kept coming back to life, and dragging that casket behind him I just thought it was magic. I thought it was a great way to turn the Undertaker, and it really made him.
Of course, they're setting up WrestleMania 8 here. That goes down on April 5th, 1992 in Indianapolis. Bruce wasn't there, but we'll just mention that Undertaker pins Jake after tombstoning him outside the ring and then rolling him back in the ring and pinning him. So the streak starts to form here because that's 2 in a row now for the Undertaker. And this is Jake's last match in the WWF because he's going to leave the company right after and eventually wind up in WCW. He says that before he even signed or before this match ever happened, he had already negotiated a multi-million-dollar deal with WCW. We'll talk about that in a minute. The rumor and innuendo is that there is a big uproar with Jake and Vince because Jake felt like he had been promised to become one of the writers, unofficially Pat Patterson's spot. Pat had resigned from his position. We'll maybe talk about that another time. Eventually, Vince decides out of loyalty and respect to Pat, the spot is going to be left vacant. And Jake feels that he's been lied to and betrayed by Vince because he really wanted that spot. And he even threatens to no-show WrestleMania unless Vince agrees to release him. And Jake has said in recent years, looking back, he regrets how he handled this situation. I know you weren't there, but you probably heard about it. Was Jake promised the writing spot, Pat's spot on the team?
I had never heard that. So if that's what Jake says, then, maybe it did, but I never heard that from Vince and never heard that scenario. I know that the one thing on the WrestleMania match was that Jake called an audible and had the tombstone be done on the outside of the ring, which, I don't know that Undertaker and Vince took too kindly to, but Undertaker was young and not in the position that he's obviously in now, and did what the veteran called.
What do you remember about the way Jake winds up leaving? If you hadn't heard this story about being promised a writer's position, why did you think Jake left here?
Money and just not being happy where he was. But I'd heard that he was going to make more money and that he had been promised the booking position at WCW.
Yeah, we should mention that Jake was supposed to be going to WCW and becoming a member of the writing team. And, of course, in the middle of all this, he has to wait 90 days for his WWF contract to expire. And before that happens and he can officially join WCW, Bill Watts is hired at WCW, and he tears up Jake's contract in front of Jake's face and laughs at him because he thinks there's no way he's paying him that amount of money. And of course, Bill Watts was brought in probably to get costs under control. So there's no chance he's giving him a huge contract. So Jake winds up debuting in WCW by attacking Sting and feuds with him, but it's kind of a relatively short run. Somewhere in there, Watts bans the Snake, and shortly thereafter that, Jake goes to rehab and Watts winds up firing him. Jake sued WCW because of Watts firing him, and then Watts was fired shortly thereafter. In hindsight, how big of a misstep was this for Jake to leave for WCW?
Well, in hindsight, horrible. I think that Jake was looking forward to being able to get the book, and it would have been the first time that Jake and his mind and his ideas really could have been tested. So I do know, because I was talking to him during that time, I'd been fired. So I was looking for a place to go. Jake was leaving and had told me, he goes, "Hey, I'm going to WCW. I'm going to have the book. When I get there, I'll bring you in," and I'm distraught. I'm just, beside myself. I have no job. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with myself. I'm begging everybody and their mother for a job. And Jake is like, "Yeah, no, man, I'll bring you in when I get down there." So, I knew he was going there. And then of course the whole Watts situation came up, and it's like, oh shit, back to square one. So it was, a combination of all of those things that just, took place. It was a domino effect that crazy. But yeah, hindsight 2020, I don't know that was the best decision on Jake's part.
Let's talk about the money. I know you don't like to talk about the money, but Jake has at different times said that this contract was going to be worth $3.5 million. And now, of course, with Watts in control, it's going to be under $200,000 a year. And the whole Watts transition happens on day 87 of the 90 days he had to wait it out. So it's almost like a movie. At the very last possible minute, the 11th hour, so to speak, the deal is pulled. Do you buy there's any way that Jake had negotiated $3.5 million deal?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of money that those guys were making at that time at WCW. Now, if I was getting Jake the performer and Jake the booker and all the above, maybe he negotiated a way to get, okay, I'm going to make X amount for wrestling. I'm going to make X amount for booking and doing the television. So when you combine it all up at the end of the year, I don't know. It could have been, but I'm not sure what those guys were really making at that time. It's a lot of money.
He comes in August, and he's out of there at some point in November. His biggest pay-per-view, I think the only pay-per-view he was a part of, was the Halloween Havoc against Sting, where they did the spin the wheel, make the deal gimmick. You were watching that. You were back with the company, or I guess you were about to be back with the company, and they do a coal miner's glove match.
I just watched it yesterday.
Oh, you watched that on purpose?
I did.
Did you watch it with Tony Schiavone and I's hilarious commentary?
No.
Well, it's available. It's available at whwmonday.com, and it's pretty fun. What'd you think of that bullshit, the coal miner's glove match?
There was a time that the coal miner's glove used to be over.
It was not in 1992.
And especially the glove that they used was pretty bad. It was just a leather glove that they taped some shit around the knuckles. It was gray duct tape was all it was. It was horrible.
So Jake starts bouncing around the indie circuit. He does some shots with New Japan, AAA, and even Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Were you in touch with Jake during any of his years away from the WWF?
I got back in touch with Jake probably right after his run. He had a hell of a run in Mexico with AAA. I believe that was with Conan and all that stuff. So got back in touch with him, see how he was doing, and just see what the hell was going on.
Around this time, it sort of became common knowledge that Jake had had a lot of struggles with substances, and I guess the word in wrestling is demons.
Demons, baby. You gotta look out for them demons, because the very kabukis, they come out at night and they get all funky and they like sneak all up in your nostrils and all and jump on down your throat and get in your belly and cause all kind of turmoil.
Jake comes back to the WWF at the Royal Rumble in 1996. He comes in at number 6, eliminates a couple of folks. Eventually Vader throws him out. Meltzer would write, ironically, with the exception of Michaels, it was Jake Roberts who received the biggest crowd reaction, including a DDT chant during the Rumble. Roberts, who had retired from wrestling to go into the preaching business last year, came back for a one shot, and it was almost scary how well he got over. In addition, Roberts, who has a reputation for being one of the most clever wrestlers when it comes to timing and picking spots, showed it once again, because even though he wasn't in good condition and couldn't do anything physically impressive, he was never in the ring when the ring wasn't filled with combatants, so he was able to get a crowd reaction for everything he did. What led to Jake's return to the WWF here, and were you guys as shocked with the reception as Dave was?
I wasn't, no, because Jake was a star. One thing about the Royal Rumble is you could bring people back and the audience would be so happy to see them if they had been gone for any length of time. So we brought Jake back for that pop and then wanted to see, okay, how's he going to handle it? How's he going to be in the match? What kind of shape is he in? And then you evaluate everything else after that. But the idea behind bringing him back was to get that nostalgia pop. And I don't know, man, maybe we got somebody we can add to the roster if he's in the right kind of shape and his head straight.
What did you and Vince think of Jake presenting himself as a born again Christian here? That news was met with a lot of eye rolls amongst wrestling fans, and I'm sure some of the boys who thought, oh, he's just working a gimmick.
Everybody thought that. That was the general consensus, that they thought that it was just another gimmick. And this is, instead of being Jake the Snake this week, he's Jake the Preacher. So I think a lot of people took it with a grain of salt, and a lot of people didn't believe it for the most part. I don't know.
Did you believe it?
I was skeptical.
That means no.
I took a wait and see, but I'm skeptical. I don't want to get into religion. I'm skeptical on all that stuff.
Let's move along. Did you talk to Jake about his newfound religion? Did you sort of try to poke holes in it?
Nope.
Were people monitoring his behavior closely, looking to see if it was a legit? I mean, it feels like everybody's just waiting on him to do something like he used to, right?
That's what people were looking for. People were looking for chinks in the armor, and people were wondering how long is it going to take until Jake falls off the wagon, because unfortunately what happens is when people go through a traumatic time in their life and they want to change and they say, I'm never going to have another drink again. I'm never going to smoke another cigarette. I'm never going to have another pill. I'm never going to snort another line of cocaine. I'm never going to be with another woman. So people now, when you make that definitive statement,
they're looking for you to slip up,
man. All the eyes are on you, and all the temptation as well. So you sure you don't want a drink, man? Hey, you sure you don't want a beer? Oh my God, look at that one over there. She's looking at you. So all eyes were on him in that way. And unfortunately, Jake kind of fed into it. We had him traveling with the agents, and he, well, I can have a beer or two. As long as I'm not getting drunk, it's okay. So the excuses started to come, but we tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. And frankly, you don't care if he's doing his job. Don't get screwed up. Don't get messed up. Just stop. Help yourself. Don't say I'm never going to have another drink.
So let me ask you this. When you guys first meet with him, does he come in to Titan Towers to have a conversation? Or are y'all talking over the phone? How does this come together where there's a conversation about him coming back, and who decides to bring up his newfound faith and make it a part of the presentation on television?
Well, at first, when he came in at first, there was no discussion about it. The initial idea was bring him in, let's see what he looks like, and we'll one step at a time, take it from there. When he came in and he was steadfast, he was doing the preaching, and that was something that he really wanted to do. So he brought up the idea of, what if we did this, and what if we made this a part of, who I am, once we had made the decision to even bring him back and see what we had in the ring, more than a Royal Rumble spot. It was Jake's idea.
Meltzer would write around this time, they're attempting to get Jake Roberts in on a part-time basis. Roberts has a lot of religious commitments and said he doesn't want to give them up. Do you remember him being sort of hesitant to come off the, this is a weird thing to say, the church circuit?
A little bit, I think that there was just so many naysayers, and we've talked about this before on the show. Unfortunately, people tend to go to the negative, and they tend to want to see people fail. So, there were a lot of rumor and innuendo of Jake talking about, this is, this religion gimmick is the best gimmick I've ever had. Oh my God, I sell so many gimmicks when I go and do the speeches at the church. It's better than, in Detroit in 87 type thing. So I don't know how much of that was true, because I never heard Jake say anything like that. And once he decided, to come back, the other thing about it was we knew there was this brain, there was this head for the business that was unmatched, in my opinion. And I wanted it, man. I wanted Jake to be a part of the creative process. And this was his time. If he really was straight and he really did want to focus on being productive in the business, this was his opportunity to come in. And it's like, man, your days working in the ring are behind you. Now is the time to make the step and go into the office and be creative.
Okay, let's talk about the free-for-all for In Your House, Rage in the Cage. It's February 18th. Jake beat Tatanka with the DDT in about 5.5 minutes. Meltzer wrote, Roberts got the big pop coming out. Even his loose ring top couldn't hide that he was terribly out of shape. He blew up fast, and judging from the comments here, a large percentage of fans noticed. Dud. What did Vince think of Jake's conditioning at the time? And whose idea was it for Jake to change his ring gear to complement him a little better?
It was Vince's idea. Hide him. Hide his body. God damn. Put a poncho on him or something. So that was Vince's idea, to hide the body. We knew. I mean, you took one look at him. He wasn't in the best cardio shape. He wasn't in the best shape, but he didn't have to be. And we felt that if we could just get the promos and get the psychology, use Jake to help some guys come along, that we would be ahead of the game.
We should mention that, well, I'll just read it here. Meltzer wrote, after the pay-per-view ended, in a segment that was taped that will probably air on the syndicated shows, Jake Roberts did an interview talking about the years where he was addicted to alcohol and cocaine, and said that he was back in wrestling to glorify the Lord. And he said that his snake is no longer named Damien. It's now Revelations. Do you recall this interview? And was there any sort of internal debate about whether or not to use Jake's drug and alcohol history as a part of the television presentation now. How was Jake with that? Was he receptive to that?
He was receptive to it because he wanted to deliver a positive message and felt that if we could make that a part of who he is, because it had been public knowledge, unfortunately, at that time, that he had battled addiction. So now you are able to go out and you're able to tell a feel-good story. This guy is battling back from it, and he's got to fight all the demons that are in front of everybody every single day, the temptations. The snake thing was... I hated the name, but we changed the snake. We went to the albino python, which I thought looked, cool as hell, and just changed it up and kind of changed the presentation a little bit.
Why did you hate the name?
I don't know. I don't, this is Brother Love saying I hate biblical names and religious names like that.
Well, cause it wasn't religion, pal. It was love.
Well, mine was, but this was Revelations.
Somewhere in February, Meltzer wrote, Billy Graham ran an inspirational message combined with a wrestling match, which was Jake Roberts versus Billy Anderson, and a video show on his and Roberts' career on March 3rd in Phoenix before 6,500 at a local church. Reports we received on it were very positive. Do you remember Billy Graham, superstar Billy Graham, not the pastor Billy Graham, sort of tag teaming with Jake here, because Billy at different times was on the outs with the company, right?
Yeah. Billy kind of goes in and out, and that's just superstar. He's superstar Billy Graham, but, no, it was something that Jake had committed to, and we didn't have a problem with it.
In March, Jake is teaming with Savio Vega to beat Goldust and the 1-2-3 Kid on a series of house shows. And then they do a dark match before Raw on March 11th, with just Jake and Ahmed Johnson taking on Owen Hart and British Bulldog. How do you think Jake enjoyed working with old Ahmed?
God, I don't know. Enjoyment working with Ahmed. I think those are two words that really don't go together. I don't know that they necessarily did, but it was a challenge.
WrestleMania 12, March 31st, 1996. Jake is going to team with Yokozuna and Ahmed Johnson. And then Vader will actually wind up pinning him. Vader is teaming with Owen and Bulldog. Meltzer gave the match 2.5 stars. This feels like a lot of talent that nobody really had any plans for. So let's just throw him in a 6-man. Is that about right?
Get him on the card. Give him a payday.
I don't know where we'll talk about it again, but Sonny is actually with the company during this time, and it feels like everybody's having their turn ribbing Sonny. Careful. Are there any interesting stories about Jake and Sonny that maybe we haven't heard on the show before?
No, not a rib. There was a time when we started to bring Jake into the creative process, and that kind of starts with bringing him into agent meetings, production meetings prior to the television tapings. And we're going through, and Vince is throwing out, asking agents for ideas. So now Jake is kind of new to this, and everybody, of course, the naysayers and everybody is looking at him like, oh God, what the hell is he going to come up with? Why is he here? He's a fuck up, this, that, and the other thing. And Jake raises his hand. I believe that Sonny was actually managing Ahmed or doing something with it, but no, she was with the heel team, but I don't remember who it was. But all I remember was Jake said, "Hey, what if in the middle of the match for the finish, Sonny jumps up on the apron, the babyfaces come over to her, she jumps down and she takes a ketchup packet." And she smashes the ketchup packet on her leg. And she starts screaming, oh my God, he hit me. And look at me, I'm bleeding. Which distracts the baby faces and the heels. Catch a quick one on them. Now, as he's explaining all this, people are giggling. And thinking, what a silly, stupid finish. To me, frankly, I I thought it was a clever finish. I actually liked it. I'm sitting there going, there's something to that, because everybody talks about ketchup and blood and shit. And with the quick dose, I just thought it was clever for something Sonny would do as a character. And I loved the finish, but that was a moment where people went, every time Jake would come up and they would say, oh yeah, what are we going to do? Take a packet of ketchup? And I just felt it was kind of unfair because was it his best idea? No. But I thought it was a clever idea, not something to be kind of giggled at and laughed at. I thought it was fun.
In April, you guys take a tour of Europe. Bulldog is working with Jake and Bradshaw, Owen. These guys are taking turns beating Jake, but Jake does get some wins over Isaac Yankem, which I can't wait to talk about another time. In Your House 7, we see Good Friends, Better Enemies, and that's going down on April 22nd in Omaha. Bulldog and Owen would beat Jake and Ahmed when Bulldog made Jake submit to a standing knee lock. Meltzer gave it a 1 3/4 stars. This probably seems like a good idea on paper. There's a lot of fucking opportunity for this to go poorly. Ahmed teaming with Jake in 1996 here.
Yeah, this goes back to one of those where things are blocked from my memory that you just try to forget. So you put up a wall that it never happened and you just try to forget it.
How fun is this?
Fall in there.
May 10th, 11th, and 12th. Mankind works with Jake Roberts. That feels like that could have been fun. And on May 17th, I believe Baltimore is the first WWF match ever between Steve Austin and Jake Roberts. Maybe their first match ever. It's been said that Jake was a huge supporter of Steve back then. Do you recall him seeing something in Steve very early?
Huge. Yes. And there were a lot of people that saw a lot in Steve, but yes, Jake was a huge supporter of Steve, and Jake really wanted to work with Steve on his psychology and his promos. I didn't think that Steve needed a lot of help on his promos, but Jake getting in Steve Austin's head and being able to help him day in and day out with his in-ring psychology and his promos, that was something Jake wanted to do. Big supporter of Steve Austin. And I do think that it helped Steve a lot. And I think Steve still uses a lot of that psychology to this day.
You guys did a double shot on May 18th, working Philadelphia and Hershey. On both shows, Austin would beat Jake. And then on the 19th, you're at MSG. Austin beat Jake in 3 minutes. Then afterwards, Austin told Roberts he was washed up and challenged him to another match. So Austin beat him again. Meltzer wrote, I guess they are going to use Roberts' name value to give the younger guys some credibility, but you have to give Roberts credit for as a team player since his days as a headliner are over. He probably had no problem putting over a guy like Steve Austin, right?
No, I don't ever remember an instance at any time with Jake ever where Jake had a problem putting anybody over.
At In Your House, Beware a Dog, Jake beat Bradshaw in 30 seconds at a dark match. And then the King of the Ring qualifying match goes down on the 27th of Raw, or 27th of May. And we see Jake pin Hunter Hearst Helmsley. It's kind of funny given what we know was supposed to happen at King of the Ring in 1996. What did Jake think of the curtain call?
Disrespectful. Kind of like everybody else. Wasn't happy about it. Felt it disrespected the business and Vince.
After he beats Hunter for the King of the Ring qualifying match, he also beats Goldust by DQ. And then round 1 is on the 28th on Superstars. And we see Jake beat Bradshaw to advance in the tournament. And he's working with Austin a lot. He actually gets a couple of wins in Peoria, in Moline, and Rock Island, but he loses in Chicago. Meltzer would write on June 17th, they had a couple of segments with Jake Roberts talking about his cocaine and alcohol problems of the past, claiming he nearly died from them on several occasions. On Superstars, they tried to hint the problems came from despondency after losing to The Undertaker and leaving the WWF in 92. But in Action Zone, it was pretty well admitted Roberts was having the problems throughout his entire WWF tenure. What do you think about this decision to sort of sit down and tell the whole story, warts and all, including at a kind of interesting time in the company here in 96, sort of alluding to the fact that he nearly died from drugs and alcohol?
He did nearly die on several occasions. I mean, drugs and alcohol overtook his life and he was close, man. It was a bad trip for him. So yeah, he nearly did.
Of course, King of the Ring 96, we did an entire show on. It's available in our archives, so we'll skim through this. In the semifinal, we see Jake beat Vader by DQ in 3.5 matches, 3.5 minutes.
3.5 matches.
Meltzer gave it a quarter star, and there's rumor and innuendo that Jake really hurt his ribs in this match, and it caused the Austin match to be rewrote. Is that legit? Was that legit, or Jake just selling his ass off?
Jake was hurting like a puppy, but the other thing going on there was Steve's lips split wide open as well.
So before the match, Jake does a backstage interview, and Austin has said the religious things that Jake said during the promo is really what helped him get the idea for Austin 316. Of course, in the finals, Austin pins Jake in under 4.5 minutes. He's the king of the ring, and we know all about the famous Austin 316 promo. Jake has said that he was probably Austin's only supporter, and that Vince at this point didn't really see him as a main eventer, but Jake was pushing hard for Steve. Is that the way you remember it?
Vince didn't see him as a main eventer, but no, Jake was a big supporter. I was a big supporter. Ross was a big supporter. Several of the agents, all the agents were huge supporters of Steve because they had seen him work in the house shows every night with Sean and just thought he was a great worker.
In August of 96, Jake gets into a feud with Jerry Lawler, who's having lots of fun poking insults at Jake's past drug and alcohol problems. And this, of course, gets us to a match at SummerSlam. Whose idea was it for these guys to work together?
I don't remember. Whose initial idea it was for them, but I think that the promos in general, we all sat there and went, these are going to be some classic promos between the two of these guys.
So Lawler and Jake, do they have some sort of conversation beforehand about don't say this and say that, or, oh, that's okay, but this is too far?
Lawler asked, and Jake said, go for it. Absolutely go for it, because the more truth there is in the statements that Lawler's making, the better it is. And the more material Jake has to work with.
We did a whole show on SummerSlam 96. Also in our archives, Lawler pins Jake in about 4 minutes. And after the match, he pours what was supposed to have been Jack Daniels down Robert's throats and all over his face. And when he tries to do it a second time, the debuting Mark Henry stops him. Meltzer gave it a dud rating. Bruce and I enjoyed the match. Thought it told the story. Go check it out. We'd love to hear what you think. Tweet us. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. He's working with Goldust coming out here, and he even manages to make a shot for USWA, and he's wrestling Lawler, but he no-shows, and Sid replaces him and beats Lawler for the title. Do you remember why Jake would have no-showed a USWA show?
I don't, other than we may have just needed him back in Connecticut. And Sid's right there, and he's close, so.
At the In Your House 10 pay-per-view, this is Mind Games. Jake beat Hunter in a dark match. Process how far in the doghouse Hunter is here in 96. Meltzer wrote this on September 23rd. Another front office change in the WWF is the addition of Jake Roberts to the booking committee. Roberts had been pushing for this for several months. The way the structure is set up right now, Roberts will join Jim Cornette as the assistant to Bruce Prichard, who writes the television shows. Despite other people taking heat for booking, the booker has, and always will be Vince McMahon. Although Prichard, Cornette, Jim Ross, and Jerry Briscoe certainly all have a hand in coming up with ideas, it is still McMahon's decision on what ideas are going to be implemented and how. The role for the other people has always been to take the heat, which is actually a role historically in wrestling where many major promoters of the past that actually did their own bookings and storylines would use a loyal wrestler as their booking to deliver the message and therefore take the heat from people who aren't happy with their push, which is roughly 95% of the guys in wrestling due to the nature of the industry. What's your memories of how Jake became an official member of the writing team? Did it go down like this?
Pretty much. I mean, when he came in, that's something that Jake wanted to do. We knew his career was winding down, but we wanted to see how he was going to do on the road and how he's going to interact with everybody. So slowly but surely, it was time. Come on in and be in the office full time. We were already picking his brain and having him part of meetings at TV and things. So it was just time.
Was anybody opposed to having Jake on the booking committee amongst the boys?
Not really.
Or the office?
I mean, there really wasn't a booking committee. It was me and Cornette at that point, and we would write TV and Jim Ross would book the house shows.
And Cornette got along great with him because they worked at Smoky Mountain and some other times. So nobody had an issue, Vince or anybody else. He felt like a good, valuable team member who could fit in.
He did. Yes, he definitely did.
Meltzer would write somewhere around here that the plan was to take Jake off the road at the end of October because he's going to start working full time in the office. Is this something Jake looks forward to, being off the road?
He said he did, and we were going to move him to Connecticut and have him live in Stamford and be in the office full time. I don't know, man. It's hard for guys when they've spent their whole life on the road to come off of it. But, he said that he was happy to do it.
He's also said that this change of lifestyle actually helped cause him to relapse into drugs and alcohol again. And, maybe it's the old idle hands thing. Do you recall that being the timeline of events, that maybe Jake was off the road so he had more free time and old habits?
I think that could definitely contribute to it. I think that he had already, being back on the road and being around everything, he had already started going down that road. But yes, being in Connecticut and not having a lot of friends, and when the workday was done, I lived 40 minutes away from the office. Cornette lived 40 minutes away from the office. There wasn't a lot of people to hang out with. So yeah, you got a lot of free time.
On October 13th, you guys ran a show in Anaheim and Vader beat Jake here. And on that house show, they taped two matches for the ABC television show Boy Meets World. And that show had a couple of characters who were supposed to be the sons of Vader. And then Vader beat Jake in one match and Barry beat Bradshaw in another. So you, as Brother Love, worked as a heel manager in both matches until Jake wound up DDTing you. I believe in real life, Vader actually broke his foot in this match with Jake. Any memories of how this all came together? It feels sort of random that Brother Love is here on Boy Meets World. We haven't really talked about this much on the show before.
Well, Mark Blautman, who was creator of Boy Meets World, you met him out at our LA show and now does Girl Meets World. But he was a big fan, and they had Vader as the father of one of the characters on Boy Meets World. So they needed to shoot an actual match in Anaheim. So when we went out there, we agreed to let them shoot this match, and the match had to keep going on forever so they could do multiple takes of the son coming down to the ring and talking to Vader. I coordinated it with Blautman and the folks at Boy Meets World. And he says, "Hey, would you do commentary on it?" And they wanted me to do the commentary on the match so that when you went to the match, as it was on TV, you heard me doing the play-by-play on the match, just because Mark Blautman kind of threw me a bone. And I asked Vince, I said, "Can I do it?" And he said, "Sure." God damn, I don't give a shit. What the hell? Who's this boy that meets what the hell? He didn't know.
So Jake's out of action until Survivor Series, and that Survivor Series goes down on November 17th, 1996. And check this match out. We've got Jake the Snake Roberts teaming with the Wild Man, Mark Marrow, and the Stalker, which is actually Barry Windham, and a young upstart named Rocky Maivia. And they're taking on Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Jerry Lawler, Goldust, and Crush. Has there ever been a group this deep? I mean, this is kind of a throwaway match on the card. All of these guys, well, maybe not one, are Hall of Famers, right?
Every one of them are Hall of Famers. Okay, maybe not Marrow, but I think that Rocky Maivia kid might have had a future.
Roberts winds up pinning Lawler with a DDT, and then he's pinned by Crush. Of course, Rocky is the sole survivor. Meltzer gave it 2 stars, and we've talked about this match briefly on our Rocky Maivia episode. So go check out our Rock episode if you'd like to hear more about that. The next night on Raw, Jake would team with Miro and beat Billy Gunn and Helmsley. Kind of fun in hindsight because you've got 2 motivational speakers beating up 2 members of DX long before any of that happened. They work a show on December 20th in Puerto Rico, where we would see Jake beat El Bronco to win the WWA Puerto Rican title. And on that show, Helmsley would defend the IC title against Vega, and Sid wrestled Duke Drose. How does this come to be?
Donde el Bronco es el WWE title. Man, El Bronco was over like Rover in Punta, Puerto Rico. So there was just a long-standing history between El Bronco and El Snako.
Are you going to tell us the real story of how these WWE superstars wind up on a WWA show, or are you just going to fuck around?
Yeah, Savio Vega was heavily involved in promoting in Puerto Rico and asked for a favor.
There you go. Let's get to Royal Rumble 97. I feel like I've said this a lot, but if you can hear all about this in the archives, he comes in at number 7. He doesn't eliminate anyone, and he's eventually eliminated by Steve Austin, who we know would go on to win the match. Bret Hart might disagree with that. Shotgun Saturday Night on the 25th. He winds up beating Sal Sincere, which is kind of fun. And then on January 31st, he's wrestling for AAA in Mexico City. He teams with the Fake Razor and the Fake Diesel, and they have a 6-man match against Pero, Cibernetico, and Piroth. Kind of cool that you guys let him work a AAA match here, right?
Well, we were working with AAA at the time, and that was after the whole San Antonio and AAA connection. But Jake had been working AAA before that. And this was kind of, when Shotgun Saturday Night, I'll tell you a quick story that was where we really started to see this thing may not work out with Jake being in Connecticut and Jake being a part of the creative team. Our very first Saturday night's main event, whatever the name of the club was going to be Vince said, you know what? Let's have the only agent. We're not going to bring in any agents for this show. I want Jake to be the only agent. You and Cornette are here. So this is y'all's show. Jake handle all the wrestling matches because there were only 3 or 4 matches on the whole thing. And we get there and there's production meeting at noon. No Jake. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No Jake. Jake's not answering his phone. Nothing. Jake shows up that night for a midnight show, roughly about 10 o'clock, and said he overslept. He was sick. He was this, he was that. So that was kind of the beginning of the end where we started saying, maybe this isn't the best fit.
So that's January 25th. On March 1st, Jake beats the Goon in Alexandria, Louisiana. And that winds up being his last match in the WWF. Meltzer would write on the 24th of March, Jake Roberts was fired. 2 weeks back, he took a rental car while on the Texas, Louisiana tour and disappeared for 2 days, including missing a shot. It was just a few weeks back when he was fired, but then rehired the next day for something similar. I guess his 9 lives were up this time. He'd been working in the office helping write television, besides working as an occasional in-ring performer when needed. What do you remember about this disappearing act in Texas and Louisiana?
Well, first he disappeared on a tour. The first time he was fired, he disappeared on a tour with the AAA guys in South Texas. And when I finally did get him on the phone, I said, Jake, we just can't do this anymore. He says, are you firing me? And I said, unfortunately, yes. And he called Vince and talked to Vince, and Vince came back in and said, you know what? I think you were a little quick on that. We'll give him one last chance, but this is it. This is his last chance. And the whole rental car thing happened, and it was on a company that we had prepaid for him. And so all that charge is coming back to the company. And that was just the last straw, man. He disappeared. Nobody could find him. And Vince said, okay, I was wrong. Next.
Do you remember any specific lines or characters or anything else like that you can come up with that you can attribute to Jake when he was?
Jake was a big part of Austin, and Jake was a big part of the Austin push and building that character of Stone Cold Steve Austin, just the Stone Cold killer and the badass. In addition to that, Jake had a hand in a lot of the Shawn Michaels stuff with Vader. And I'm not with Vader. I meant with Sid going into the Alamo Dome, but, just having Jake to be able to help guys with promos and psychology and matches to me was very valuable.
What did you think? And what did the company think of Jake's appearance and Beyond the Mat?
I was sad. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I was sad.
Did Vince see the movie?
Yes.
Did you have a conversation with Vince about Jake in that movie?
I think, Vince's, his overall thing was just a portrayal of wrestling overall in that movie is what he really focused on. But I think that the one word that describes everything with Jake was just sad. You felt for him because Jake is really a good guy. He really and truly is. But man, he's a prime example of sometimes when people have issues and abuse, it takes hold of him, makes him a different person.
We break down Beyond the Mat in a watch along episode, here on the archives. If you'd like to see more about what Bruce thinks about the movie, that's all there. Is the first time you saw Jake after Beyond the Mat and his firing here when he appeared on Monday Night Raw in Atlanta? I think it was like March of 05 or something like that.
Yeah, it was. And I remember Jake kind of staring at me from afar, and I really didn't know what to expect. I think Jake hated me I was the bad guy. I was the one that had to deliver the message, not just once, but twice. Let him go the last time that he had been in the company. So I didn't know what to expect from Jake, and he was kind of staring at me from afar, and I frankly avoided him. I was thinking, you know what? Maybe if we just don't cross paths, everything will be fine and move on. And finally, we were too close to ignore. And man, he came at me and just gave me a hug and cried and apologized for the last time that we were together and asked me to forgive him and not to hate him. And I said, never hated you. And you're forgiven. I mean, shit happens. And I just hope you got your shit straight.
It was around this time that, I guess we should mention he was on that Raw to confront Randy Orton, and Randy Orton is headed for a match with the Undertaker at WrestleMania. He's doing his legend killer gimmick. So of course, Orton eventually hits Jake with the RKO, and the WWE puts out the Pick Your Poison DVD about his career. How does this all come about? Is it strictly, hey, let's sell some DVDs. This guy's got a good story, and okay, let's put it back on TV to sort of remind everybody who he is?
Well, the legend killer was something that happened. And I think it was Michael Hayes that said, well, shit, Jake lives in Atlanta. He's a legend we can kill. So talks started with, I believe not Jim Ross, but Johnny Ace, and started talking to Jake, and it was a one-off, it was a one-off deal. But then the opportunity to tell his story and maybe do a DVD, make him a little money and us make some money too, but tell his story, get it out there.
In 2007, Jake was placed in a 14-week voluntary rehab program by WWE on December 10th, 2007. And in May of 08, JR would report that, quote, Jake Roberts has been doing well the past few weeks after completing a treatment program. Do you know how many times you guys put Jake in rehab?
I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like a half dozen times.
Does Vince or anybody else ever say, this is getting fucking ridiculous, it's not going to take, I give up?
No, he won't give up on people. And as much as frustrated as he gets, no, he won't. He thinks if he can help them. And a lot of that, I think you can attribute to Steven Regal or William Regal, because everybody gave up on him and he made it through.
In October of 2012, once again, using drugs and alcohol, Jake moved in with Diamond Dallas Page in Atlanta, and it was all documented in the documentary, The Resurrection of Jake Roberts. Jake at the time weighed more than 300 pounds. When he moved in with DDP, was having trouble walking without losing his breath. And then during the filming, of course, he had shoulder surgery, which was paid for by crowdfunding, where fans donated all the money to have this surgery. And after about 18 months, he had lost about 50 pounds and regained a lot of his mobility. He credits a lot of this to DDP yoga and of course changing his diet. I think he's gluten-free and all that jazz now. Did you ever see that movie, The Resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts?
I did. I saw it. I saw part of it with Dallas and Jake at Booker's gym in Texas City. And then I saw it later when it came on Netflix.
I know you weren't there, but I should mention on January 6, 2014, Jake made an appearance on the Old School Raw, and he pulls the snake out and throws it on an unconscious Dean Ambrose. And Dean Ambrose is obviously an old school wrestling fan, and you can see him smiling when it's happening, because you know, Dean, like a lot of us, had Jake as one of his favorites growing up. And then in February of 14, it was reported by TMZ that Jake had some sort of cancer below his knee and was going to have surgery to remove it. But the highlight of 2014, of course, is going into the WWE Hall of Fame. He gave a phenomenal speech, and he's doing a lot better these days. Fortunately, his story could have ended very tragically, probably several times, as we've covered here. But Jake is one of those great success stories in wrestling, at least in a lot of ways to me. Based on everything that he's gone through and where he is now, he's got to be a success story, right, Bruce?
I think so. And I couldn't be happier, because there were so many times that, unfortunately, we would say, who's next?
What do you feel is Jake's legacy in the wrestling business?
I hope it's his mind. I really and truly do. I think that those that know, those inside the business, will remember him for just a great psychologist.
Well, let's remind everybody, you can pick up tickets to see Bruce and I live in Boston, and we're going to be doing that before you know it, man. Come see us. We're coming to see you before the Clash of the Champions pay-per-view on Sunday, December 17th. Tickets are available for that House of Blues show at boxofgimmicks.com. And cruise on over to Facebook, where you can vote in our poll right now. Who do you want to hear from, man? Is it Edge? Is it Booker T? Is it Randy Orton? Is it Rob Van Dam? Go vote right now. And don't forget to ask us a question about the Steiner brothers. That's who's coming your way next week. So tune in for the Steiners. Be sure to ask your questions on Facebook. And now let's get some questions from Facebook for Jake. Let's rapid fire these, Bruce. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Johnny Reyes says, I always wanted to see a Rowdy Roddy Piper versus Jake the Snake Roberts rivalry. How do you think it would have went? And who would have been the heel? Who would have been the babyface?
If Roddy was the babyface and Jake was the heel, would have been some of the best promos in the business.
Aaron wants to know, did Jake have more of a relationship with Sam Houston, Rockin' Robin, or Grizzly Smith?
Probably Sam Houston.
Matt Sampson wants to know, was there ever a real push from the office to get Jake in better shape during his comeback?
Yeah, we tried, but you can only do so much.
Trent May wants to know, is it true that Jake and the Nasty Boys got into a bar fight in Peoria, Illinois, which led to one of the Nasty Boys being stabbed?
I have absolutely no idea.
Mark Wilson wants to know, what was Cheryl Roberts like around the roster?
Cheryl was cool, man. She got along with everybody. She's a really nice lady.
Patrick wants to know, what were Vince's and Bruce's first reaction to meeting Damien for the first time?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I ever had the snake put on me was in Anaheim, California, when I did the Brother Love thing for Boy Meets World, and it was actually kind of cool.
Justin Sweeney wants to know, how many snakes had quote unquote accidents and had to be replaced, since Jake has said he didn't care for snakes?
Accidents. I don't know. There weren't, all the snakes that were under the care of the WWF, as far as I know, none of them died. So they were all sent back when it was time to feed, but I don't know of any accidents per se.
Well, there's a rumor out there that he would forget that some were in a car and they would freeze, and, he had to carry the thing through airports, and sometimes they would get loose in the baggage handling area.
Yeah, I think some of that is folklore, but as far as I know, and again, going back to the time that I was there, and as far as I know, I don't remember any snakes ever dying.
Was it true the British Bulldogs would throw lit cigarettes in the bag with the snake?
Oh God, I would hope not.
Steve Cox wants to know, is Jake the greatest wrestler in the WWF Hall of Fame that never held the title during his extensive run?
I don't know if he's the greatest wrestler that never held a title, but he's definitely up there. Guys that never held a championship. Yeah.
Jason wants to know, did Jake ever pull any pranks on Vince using the snake?
No, because Vince didn't do it. The funniest one was when we had Jim Cornette kind of cornered in the gorilla position, and Jake came back and brought the snake back and kind of stuck it up behind Cornette and went in between Cornette's legs. Jim Cornette actually went from the floor on top of a table in one mighty leap, getting away.
Logan wants to know, I met Henry Godwin some time ago, and he gave me a story about Jake stealing the Godwin rental and wrecking it. When they complained to Vince, he told them to calm down because everyone knows that's how Jake was. Is this something that happened commonly? And is this how Vince handled those situations?
No, it's not how Vince would handle the situation. I'm sure that it was addressed and taken care of. I think that's the rental car thing that he's talking about.
Doc Austin,
I think it was their rental car.
Doc Austin wants to know, was Jake ever considered for a managerial role?
As far as in the ring, no, not really. Yeah, no.
Ruben wants to know, do you think if Jake had won King of the Ring 96, the industry would be completely different today?
Yeah, because that wouldn't have happened.
Jason wants to know, did enhancement talent receive a hazard pay bonus for having Damien dropped over them after Jake won?
$50.
Aaron wants to know, was Jake even considered to be the higher power during the Undertaker's Lord of Darkness gimmick?
No.
Mark Olivier wants to know, I've heard people say that if it wasn't for his demons, Jake could have been the greatest of all time. What's your opinion on that?
I think that Jake probably could have been one of the greatest creative forces in the business without his demons. Yes.
Here's the question though. I've always wondered, would he have been as creative if it weren't for the demons?
Good point.
Chris wants to know, if Jim Cornette contacted Snakes R Us to purchase one of the snakes, what would that sound like?
Fuck that goddamn snake. I'll make a pair of boots out of it.
Brendan wants to know, did Jake ever leave his snake behind in a hotel room after a big night?
Probably.
David Sanders wants to know, any fun partying stories with Brother Love and Jake the Snake?
It was always an attraction to go to gentlemen's establishments and, taking Damien out for some of the young ladies to use as a prop while they were showing their wares.
Matt Owl wants to know, what is Bruce's favorite Jake promo and or match?
I'll go with the WrestleMania promo we talked about earlier.
WrestleMania 6
in Toronto.
Jordan Carson wants to know, Jake was scheduled to be on Bite This with Todd Grisham in 05 to promote the Pick Your Poison DVD, but canceled at the last minute. What's the story behind the cancellation?
God, I have absolutely no idea.
Matt Edison wants to know, any idea why, as a Texan, Jake used Stone Mountain, Georgia as his billing hometown?
Because that's where he was, he mainly lived, and he liked Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Travis Sloan wants to know, any funny stories about the snake getting loose backstage?
There used to be times when they would rib guys who were really afraid of the snake and put it on them. And some of those could be really funny. And some of those could turn out quite tragic with the snake latching onto people and biting them. But that's about it.
Tristan wants to know, who did Jake get along with backstage and who were some he didn't get along with?
I think for the most part, Jake pretty much got along with everybody. I know Andre didn't particularly care for him, but for the most part, Jake got along with everybody.
And you're going to get along if you go ahead and cruise over to brucepritchard.com right now. Pick up a shirt just in time for the holidays. And when you make your order, be sure to put in the phone number of whoever you're giving this fabulous gift to. Because not only are they going to get a cool shirt, lots of fun stuff over there, including a Doot fanny pack. You got to get that. And just in time for winter, the I used to be over beanie. Come on. Pretty cool. But put the phone number in there for your friend and they get a call from Bruce Prichard. Now that is a Christmas miracle. Go check it out. It's Prichard, brucepritchard.com rather. And you can follow us on Twitter at Prichard Show. You can vote in the poll and ask us questions about the Steiners at facebook.com/something to wrestle. You can tweet him. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. I am out of words. We are out of time. We'll see you next week right here on, what's the name of the show, Bruce?
Something to Wrestle With. Me, Bruce Prichard.
I was hoping you would say Conrad Thompson.
No. You say Conrad Thompson.
Nah, we're out of here.
stops.